evening. We are going to reconvene um, continue our city council meeting this evening. We had a closed session before this meeting. The city council convened in closed session to meet with staff and the city's labor attorney to receive a briefing and legal advice on the collective bargaining negotiations with ASME Local 3399 and UFCW Local 400. The meeting was closed to annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3-305B9, which permits a meeting to be closed to discuss matters related to collective bargaining negotiations, and 3-305B7, which permits a meeting to be closed to consult with counsel to receive legal advice. And so this evening, we are continuing our budget work. Tonight is a budget work session. The only item this evening for discussion is the budget reconciliation. Just as a reminder for everyone, Monday, today, on the 13th, the General Assembly session ends. So, and I think they're still going, but it's over tonight. On Wednesday, April the 15th, the City Council will not meet to allow staff time to prepare materials between budget work sessions. And on Monday, April the 20th, the City Council will have another budget work session at 7:30. It will begin with a public hearing on the FY27 budget, and then we will have a budget work session. The first item is the traffic calming and sidewalk decisions, and then following that will be budget reconciliation discussion number 2. And then on Wednesday, April the 22nd, the council will meet at its regular time. We will have a matter for the record, introduction of the Montgomery College scholarship recipients. And then we will have a couple of work sessions that evening. The Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority reauthorization, 1-year extension of the contract with Barbican Thornton and Company LLP, designation of University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Laboratory as the sole source for procurement of a tree canopy analysis. And then we will also have a budget work session where we are engaging in budget reconciliation item number 3. And so with that, we are going to move into our public comments this evening. Just as a reminder, we are asking for everyone to no profanity, please be kind, no cheering, no booing, and make sure that you state your name, be mindful of your 3 minutes, and if you know your ward, please state that as well. So do we have any public comments this evening?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, it's already started. That's not fair. Good evening, Paul Huebner, Ward 3. I'd like to talk about the Raftelis report and the baseline assumption that city government must necessarily increase expenditures, programs, wages, and benefits every year, regardless of the wants and needs of residents. That's not necessarily true. I detected no consideration of any decreased or lowered expenditures, which is what most residents must do, especially if they are not of the nouveau riche or newest wealthy residents. When we, the city, begins from a point of unlimited growth, excesses will prevail. When we can get 3 separate and valid tax rates, like the constant yield rate, the current rate, and the city manager's proposed rate, then the department heads and directors and their senior team will be compelled to do what they were hired to do, to allocate personnel and resources to their greatest value. As it stands now, the manager and his team have foisted the responsibility of reconciliation on you, the mayor and council, to do their job. And they have convinced you that it is your job. They make you decide, so you are the bad guys or gals. Whereas with 3 different perspectives on budget preparation, you could more easily see what is gained or lost in each scenario. Then you could make an informed decision. During reconciliation and once staff have their budget allocations, it should rightly be their job on how to allocate scarce resources to accomplish their given tasks. That's what they were hired to do. I do realize this would be a big lift because it would require them to do the heavy lifting and reveal what they actually need to perform. And you should begin a systematic review of accomplishments and shortfalls. That's why I have repeatedly advocated to allocate to them the task of the 3 budgets and often have them discern what they actually need. Lastly, the city manager and staff have often proven to be incapable of spending the very money they annually request from this council to the tune of millions and millions of dollars in deficit per year and year over year over year, as I presented in my PowerPoint just last week. Finally, from the city manager himself, to underscore my point, on page 8 of the FY27 proposed budget, he said, however, and I quote, however, the majority of this deficit of $2.1 million is due to projected FY26 unspent capital projects, end quote. Just like the police atrium funded for completion in fall of 2019 with $427,000 of money. I hope I am being properly respectful because we are very grateful for the earnest struggles that you and the members of this council engage in on our behalf as we seek only to get a fair shake for all involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. As in the past, I'd like to say that I'm representing the Friends of the Equipment Replacement Reserve. Alas, there is only one friend. Last week, we heard dire warnings about the Equipment Replacement Reserve, the ERER, being depleted by fiscal year 2030. While that could happen, it can only happen if the city stops making contributions to the fund. That is not the plan. The city manager has stated their intention to fully fund the ERR every year going forward. This is the financially responsible and financially sustainable thing to do. I've done the math. If the ERR is fully funded each year, then given the more than adequate amount now in the reserve, the ERR is in good shape for the next 40 years. That's the payoff of fiscal responsibility. It's true that from fiscal year 2018 to 2024, the ERR was substantially underfunded. It's also true that the ERR was overfunded in fiscal years 2013 and 2014, when the city was saving up not only for replacements for equipment, but also for the replacements of the replacements. Given the overfunding, there's no need to correct for the underfunding. Back in January, the city's finance head provided me with the ERR spreadsheet. I calculated the full funding amount by dividing the replacement cost of each item by its life in years to get the annualized cost, then adding all those costs. The data and calculations are attached to the written version of this comment. The full funding amount is about $1,150,000, about $50,000 less than was in the proposed budget, but still more than the budgeted draw on the reserve. It may be that I erred in my calculation. Last week, the Public Works head stated that the city has a formula. I hope the council will ask for the result of that formula and for the data used. And I hope that the council will adjust the budgeted contribution to the ERR to the full funding level, whatever that level may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Hi, good evening, Council. How are you doing? I'm Elizabeth Wallace, Ward 1. I'm here today to support all of you in making excellent informed decisions about the city, for the city regarding the budget. I implore you to ask as many questions as you need to get the answers you need to make the decisions. Ask, and don't stop asking. I asked some questions last week, not of you, and then I asked some more. And so everything I was going to talk about today, I don't even trust the answers anymore. So I'm just going to tell you, please, if you don't trust the answer, if you feel funny about the answer, if somebody else has a different perspective, keep going, to make sure you get it as best as you can by the time you have to make the decision. And so that's all I'm saying today, because it was going to be much longer. But now I don't trust the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments? Going once, going twice. Do we have any virtual public comments this evening? Okay, we're going to move to our budget reconciliation item. And I just want to, turn things over, but before I do so, I just want to remind my colleagues again of the reconciliation process so that we're all on the same page. We are going to have 3 reconciliation sessions. We have one tonight, we will have one next Monday, and then we will have another next Wednesday. The goal for the reconciliation discussions are for you to flag items that you would like for your colleagues to consider for when we get to the point of our last reconciliation meeting, which will be on the 22nd, where I will be asking for us to start voting on reconciliation items to really try to make sure that we're able to give staff enough time to finalize the budget. So you can put items up on the reconciliation list. Gather information from staff. I really encourage folks to gather information from staff before putting things on the list so that we can have realistic estimates in terms of the cost and potential impacts of the items that are being proposed. We'll have one tonight, we will have one next Monday, and then on the 3rd meeting, we will be voting. The staff has, for folks, if this is, just to remind everyone, there is a spreadsheet that we use annually to help with quantifying the impacts of reconciliation items on the overall budget, as well as the impact of these reconciliation items on the tax rate. So I do encourage everyone, council members, you should have received this spreadsheet. And so I encourage everyone to kind of play around with the spreadsheet to see what the actual impacts of your reconciliation items may be. And staff usually will send out updated spreadsheets over the course of budget reconciliation. And so with that, I know that there was a couple of questions that were being raised of our city management office during our last meeting. And so I'm going to turn things over to the city manager to talk through some of the items that they have already proposed for reconciliation, and also any additional information that might be useful for members of the council to know in terms of responses that we've already previously, questions that we've already raised of you. So with that, I will turn things over to the city manager.
So I just want to,
Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we overcame a technical difficulty. As Madam Mayor indicated, I'd like to begin tonight's reconciliation discussion with the mayor and council by addressing, as I pledged at our last meeting, to follow up on some FTE-related questions as we continue to refine our proposal for FY27. This in particular refers to those positions that have either in whole or in part historically received some funding from the ARPA program, the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So as a little bit of initial background for Mayor and Council and the public, the city received $17.5 million in American Rescue Plan Act fund monies in 2 increments. So it was in 2022 and 2023. The largest allocation, city operations, included funding allocations for 3 positions, among other things: ARPA manager, ARPA information technology software analyst, and ARPA payroll and accounting specialist. These staff positions were created in 2022 and to provide ARPA administration and support capacity. The positions were characterized as new temporary hires to administer the ARPA funds. ARPA funds must be fully expended by December 31st of this current calendar year, 2026. Any unspent funds must be returned to the U.S. Department of Treasury. So a little more detail with respect to these 3 positions that are funded in whole or in part with ARPA money. First, ARPA manager. This position was created to manage the ARPA funds and serve as the portfolio manager. It ensured cross-departmental communication and collaboration with local and regional partners around ARPA-funded initiatives. It was called to monitor and report on ARPA expenditures, assist the council and the city administration in mapping out funding priorities based on assessments of need on an annual basis, and implementing all ARPA projects. The role was assumed by then acting Deputy City Manager in the spring of 2023. Second position, ARPA Information Technology Software Analyst, later retitled IT Project Specialist. This was created to assist in the evaluation, design, and implementation of software programs and managed city platforms to ensure integration with current city services, to also implement document management platform, to assist with the city's website upgrade. Key software programs included Customer Relationship Management, or CRM, software to eventually replace GovQA/MyTKPK, and to manage constituent requests in a central database. Currently, this position provides key technical support for the city's MPIA process, including implementing a new MPIA platform called JustFOIA, as well as managing various network security applications and technologies. And third, ARPA Payroll and Accounting Specialist. It has since been retitled Senior Accounting Specialist. This position existed as a part-time position in the general fund prior to ARPA funding at again, part-time, so 0.5 FTE. With ARPA funding, the position was enhanced to take on additional accounting roles to support ARPA programs, including Equipment Replacement Reserve, or ERR, related accounting, and it supports citywide financial functions and police department needs in support of the red light and stop sign camera programs, as well as assisting with certain grant applications and the city's financial compliance obligations. This chart is an illustration of each of these three positions and their respective degree of funding by ARPA, with ARPA funds, versus the general fund. And ARPA funding, ARPA funding in FY27 is proposed to be at 0.25 in ARPA for the ARPA manager, and 0.75 of the general fund in FY27. IT project specialists, 0.5 FTE, and general fund at 0.5. Senior accounting specialist, ARPA funding would be 0.5, general funding 0.5, for a total of ARPA funding in FY27 of 1.25, and again, this would be in the first half of the fiscal year, where the city can continue to use ARPA funds through December 31st of this year. And then general fund reflects FY27 1.75. So the ARPA manager duties were absorbed by then Deputy City Manager for starting in the spring of 2023. These positions will, I propose that they would continue with all or partial ARPA funding through December of 2026. The total cost of retaining and funding these positions from the general fund in FY27 would be $198,071. The IT project specialist and senior accounting specialist positions are both in the bargaining unit, AFSCME local number 3399. So here's the reconciliation with respect to these that I would respectfully propose for council's consideration. First, the city's operational needs prior to ARPA funding and evolving needs post-ARPA funding have, in my opinion, necessitated the need to maintain these positions beyond December of 2026. Per Council Resolution 2025-25, adopting the 2027 council budget priorities, Council directed the city manager to, quote, identify alternatives to increases in the general fund to support FTEs that leverage ARPA funds that expire on December 31st of 2026. I've identified pathways to continue the funding of these positions in the following manner. The ARPA manager role was absorbed by then, just again as a note, the ARPA manager role was absorbed by then acting deputy city manager position in spring of 2023. The ARPA manager functions continue to be performed by the current deputy city manager. The ARPA manager functions, elimination of one vacant position within the police department, and reducing pooled part-time hours equating to 1.5 FTEs, which equates to $205,320 in general fund savings. That is the offset that I am proposing. Additionally, I've identified sustainable general fund savings of $54,002 due to efficiencies created through the elimination of long-term service contracts, licenses, and other expenses. This brings the total proposed sustainable general fund savings would be $259,322. So the total cost of retaining and funding these positions from the general fund in FY27, once again, is $198,071. The proposed general fund savings sufficiently covers the cost of retaining the 3 positions and generates a general fund surplus in this category of $61,251. This chart is brought to further illustrate both cost and FTEs. FTE reductions, this is proposed general fund savings. FTE reductions for police, 1 vacant police corporal position, that's 1 FTE count. And this is a fully loaded cost. This is not just salary, but also fringe. This would be associated overtime, equipment, training, and other costs that are normally associated with budgeting for a vacant position at this level. Then is pooled part-time hours. These are reduction that amounts to a half FTE, 0.5, from pooled part-time hours in the Recreation Department and Communications Department. The cost savings would be approximately $23,483. This comes to a total of $205,320. The sustainable operational savings. This is the additional things beyond FTEs. To identify them a little further for you, Microsoft licensing. The current cost in FY26 is $29,805. The cost that we've been able to renegotiate for FY27 and beyond is $15,329. So there's an estimated cost savings in FY27 of $14,477. Next is Success Factor. This is HR-related software. This is no longer necessary due to the implementation of the city's HRIS system, Human Resources Information System. The cost in the current fiscal years for this subscription of this software is $31,025, and we are proposing that there be no need for it or cost in FY27, so that would reflect a sustained savings of $31,025. And the city had been, both Microsoft, SuccessFactor have been subscriptions, long-time subscriptions, annual expenses in the general fund for the city. And server license, number 3, server license and maintenance. We have identified an expense in IT that's been historically $8,500 a year, where we no longer need that expense. And so the sustainable savings is $8,500. So all of that brings it to a total of $54,000. And while that isn't necessary to cover the amount of expense that would be incurred by retaining the 3 positions, I just wanted to share these as additional sustained operating savings in the general fund. So at this stage, I am happy to receive any questions or comments about this reconciliation proposal.
Great. Thank you so much. And I just want to confirm that the eliminations that are being proposed will be permanent, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
And one other question, just in terms of the other sustainable operational savings. For all of these licenses, was it primarily due to the fact that we've upgraded these other systems? So we now have HRS, we now have all of these other systems that the council has funded using in some instances the ARPA funds to procure, that ultimately created some efficiencies elsewhere?
Yes, and I know Z is, if he's not in the room, he's available online to answer any specific question with regard to how those expenses, some of that was negotiated license, it's a reduction. Some was just a software application that we no longer need. And if you're asking specifically about the maintenance and server, that migrated to a cloud-based platform, so that it was no longer necessary to subscribe for a server and the associated maintenance with it. That's no longer an expense due to that, again, transfer to a cloud-based platform.
Okay, because I was surprised to see the Microsoft licensing and the savings there, so I was just interested in kind of how that played out.
Sure, and any specific or detailed questions with respect to any of these three, staff would certainly welcome them and we can respond to council.
Thank you. Council member, I think I see Council Member Schlegel. Schlegel, then Landman, then Gilbert.
Thank you. My first question, I just have two. One was that those additional 54,000 or so in savings, would it be appropriate to say that those are responding, even though we're getting them in this presentation, they're responding to the budget priorities resolutions call for continue current fiscal year city services with presentations on potential staff identified cost-saving measures? Is that what you're providing us
That would
in
be
that
true.
aspect?
Yeah, I'm sorry, didn't you?
Yeah, so,
Yeah, that would be true of any proposed cost savings in the proposed FY27 budget that staff is bringing. Where part of our imperative is to try to find efficiencies, cost savings. Sometimes they're in the nature of 1 year, where if we can do that, and even better if they're sustainable. And these are ones that are sustainable.
so would any of these have been not going forward had there not been this ARPA FTE question?
No, we continue. It's a continuous process to try to identify. Some of these were negotiations and discussions and investigations that were still ongoing at the time that the proposal was put together back in February. So some of this was the result, the fruit of some ongoing work that we were doing. And we continue to do, even once a budget would be adopted, we want to continue to try and find any way to save money that we can.
Thank you. And with the police corporal position, could you break down a little bit more of the 181,837? Is that includes all administrative costs? So if it's all right to do so, is it possible to say how that breaks down in terms of the salary and?
We could get council that information. I don't have it in front of me. But yes, it's all broken down by category.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Schlegel. And City Manager DeSpirito, I just want to confirm that dollar amount was both salary and fringe, correct?
Yes, as well as some additional things. Normally, a loaded cost would include overtime, some equipment, training, other things that would be associated with the hiring of a police sworn officer.
Great. Councilmember Schlegel, just confirming that's an old light. Councilmember Landman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank the city manager for these diligent efforts to identify additional cost savings. If you could go to the slide in which you showed the FTEs and then the proposed changes in FTEs from it was at the very beginning of your presentation. There is one issue that I would like to understand. When you calculated the savings or the total costs of the FTEs in fiscal 2027 that would be coming from the general fund versus from ARPA, and then you projected whether it was sufficient to essentially, there you go, cover the, I think the next slide might have had the dollar figure in it, or maybe this is as far as we got, but that 205,000, I'm trying to understand whether the figure that, the percentages that you calculated in the previous slide represent the percentage of the cost that is attributed to ARPA versus, or not to ARPA in the fiscal year when the cost would be divided between those two sources, and what it would actually be costing for the full-on positions being carried over into fiscal 28 when there is no ARPA money. I have a sense that that $205,000 would not actually be sufficient to cover the positions for a full year, but it represents enough to cover the portion that it falls within the general fund budget in fiscal 2027. Could you just address whether those numbers are reflective of what the full-on cost would be when the entire budget year cost falls would come from the general fund rather than from partially ARPA and partially general fund?
Yes, you are
So that
correct.
we
You
able
are,
to tell whether in fact this is sufficient to substitute, as I think was your intention. Thank you.
right, you are correct that that illustrates the portion of general fund that would be called for in FY '27. Part of our ongoing challenge is to continue to find sustainable savings in FY '28 that would reflect an entire year, and that is what I pledge to do. But this is a snapshot of what is literally proposed and would be necessary. But in FY '27, which is half the year, we do have some remaining ARPA dollars, which rather than returning it to the U.S. Treasury, we certainly think it makes sense to make full use of them on behalf of our community and not load any more expense in the general fund than we have to. But it is a half-year general fund picture for that half of the year that we are no longer eligible to use ARPA funds or no longer have any.
So I do just want to make sure that I'm clear and that that I'm clear on what this is. So if you were to go back to the prior slide, okay. So this is showing the proportion of the FTEs in which we're using the FY '27. That was funded using ARPA dollars, right? Is this true given the case that the ARPA dollars for FY '27 is only for half year?
Yes, that's why it's referring to FY '27. This would be for half a year with ARPA, half a year would require, yeah, that would be general fund. And that's why it's offering as reconciliation, offsetting savings from a full year's worth of savings for a vacated police position, as well as a full year's worth of those pulled part-time hours from recreation and communications. But this reflects that half of the year is we still have some ARPA money, and the other half we do not.
Okay, so because I just want to make sure, because in my brain, we have multiple buckets going on at the same time, right? You have the proportion of the ARPA funds that were used to cover the proportion of a body, of an FTE, right? And so historically, the ARPA manager, for example, 25% of that FTE was paid for using those ARPA funds, correct? And so if we're trying to make sure that for that second half of the fiscal year of FY '27, that we can cover that 0.25% of a half, the 25% of an FTE for a half a year, which is what we're talking about. Dollar-wise is one thing, body-wise is something different, right? And so what you're showing here, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in order to, forgetting all about the wonkiness of us only having ARPA dollars for half a year, if we had to fully fund these positions in the general fund, FTE-wise, body-wise, we would need to find 1.25 FTE, right? Just, that's how many bodies we would have to find, right? And so if you go to the next slide, the one where you're actually showing. So you're showing right here in the FTE reductions that you are body-wise reducing the FTE count by 1.5 FTE, which is more than what the ARPA allocation was under the prior slide. Now, we're just talking about bodies right now. We're not talking about money, right? So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that, right? So, but it is important because these are permanent reductions, right? And those other proportions were already and have been historically accounted for in our budget. These were positions that had been in there for a while, so it's not like we had to make up those general fund amounts. Those general fund amounts were, those FTEs were already there. We just, expanded them. Maybe we made them from part-time to full-time, or we created a new one with the ARPA manager, but over time, we've taken other positions to ultimately account for those bodies. So I just want to make sure that from the body count, like the FTE count, what we are showing over time is, especially if these are permanent, is an overall reduction in our FTE amount above and beyond the FTE added as a result of those ARPA funds. So we went from a 1.5 FTE increase paid for with ARPA to now a 1.25, I think, 1.25 FTE addition due to ARPA to now a 1.5 FTE reduction based on the what you have here.
So in that context, there would be a net decrease in FTEs of 0.25.
Correct. So I think the other piece that I just want to make sure that I am clear about is in terms of the salary differential or the salary benefit differences, right? And I just want to make sure that if you go back to your prior slide, where we say the total cost of retaining and funding these positions from the general fund is $198,000, right? Is that 198 the full ARPA amount of the 1.25, or is that the difference between that 1.25 and the half of year of ARPA funds? So if I'm thinking about what do I need to make up for in this budget, right? I still have half a year of ARPA dollars, right? That I got to spend, and I got to spend it towards these bodies, right? So I'm trying to make sure that what I'm understanding is the case, because you don't necessarily have to make up the total cost of the full 1.25 FTE. You really only have to make up half of a fiscal year's worth of the 1.25 FTE salaries. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm clear on what this 198 includes.
Yes. That's reflecting the general fund expense for the second half of FY27, where we don't have the ARPA funds available. In other words, what would the general fund have to pick up in lieu of ARPA monies that had been available in the first half of the fiscal year?
Okay, so let's just triple check that to make sure that that 198 is indeed 50% of the salaries, whatever's remaining, right? Because I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because there could potentially be more, dare I say, general fund savings if what we're talking about is the full 1.25 FTE cost and not the balance from the ARPA.
Good evening, Mayor, Council Member. I have a spreadsheet that actually portray the total cost of the general fund for these three positions, and also the reduction savings that we have to cover those three positions, okay? So for the ARPA position that needed to be funded by the general fund in the second half of fiscal year 27, the cost of the ARPA manager or the deputy city manager, that cost is $64,873.33, and that is 0.25 FTE. Okay, that amount includes the salary of $52,785 and the fringe benefit of $12,087. Okay, the total of that position for 0.25, and that is going to be covered by the general fund, is $64,873. For the IT position, that costs for half of the year, and we call it half FTE. Total cost of that is $70,834. That includes the salary of $52,196.61, and also the fringe benefit of $18,637. And for the finance position, it's also a half FTE, and that is covered by the general fund in the second half of fiscal year 27. The total cost is $62,363.87. And with the salary cost of $38,532.87, fringe benefit of $23,831 even. So the total cost of these three positions together is $198,071.05, and that is 1.25 FTE.
Perfect. So that's a 1.25 FTE for half of the fiscal year,
Yes, ma'am.
given that we have the ARPA covering the rest.
Yes,
Awesome.
ma'am.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. My question was relative to the corporal's position. I had two questions, actually, and they're both kind of asking to address the labor perspective. First of all, how long have that position been vacant? And second, what impacts will it have on labor within the police department? How are we going to compensate for the loss of, what that position did within the police department?
It's not a particular position. Any given year, we did a historical review. In conjunction with HR, I did a historical review of spend on sworn officer positions. Typically, we have at least one position a year that is just never filled. Sometimes it's more than that, but it depends, and it's a rolling thing. But there has been money left over commensurate with at least one position every year for at least the last 5 years. So this is just reducing the complement by one. In essence, it's kind of like an execution rate, in a sense, on the vacancy, in that rather than planning to once again fully fund a position that ultimately doesn't most likely get filled, that we just plan to not fund it. Because we've always got at least one position that isn't filled. And we have rolling recruitment, but there's some years where there's a number of vacancies that we haven't been able to fill. I know the department tries its best. In some years, our vacancy level is smaller than other years, but in my conversations, and I've done this in concert with the chief, believe that, we can sustain this, and that, again, the record shows that we have dollars that are allocated annually for police officer classification. Okay, in this case, we're tagging it as a corporal level that we would not need to budget for next year, because history shows that those monies wouldn't have been spent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert.
Could I amend just one additional thing? And I'm sorry, I missed the second part of your question. I apologize. Impact to the department. In my opinion, there is no operational impact. Again, there's always at least one position that doesn't get filled. We're still adequately staffing our shifts, and so there's no public safety issue that I see associated with doing this. It's more of an accounting technique that we can use to tighten up our budgeting a little bit more than we have.
Thank you. Councilmember Schlegel, is that a new light?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Schlegel.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation and for all the work you've done to pull it together. So in light of the clarity that we have that the offsets that you are proposing would cover the second half of FY27. So you characterize the offsets as long-term sustainable. Is it in fact the case that for the long term, we would need $396,000 and $142 or something in offsets, which would be double the amount of 193 or 198?
Well, it wouldn't be double that because I mean, that would be a total cost, but half of what that figure you just provided, we would have accounted for this year. So it would be finding the other half for FY28. And I'm pledging that I will find that difference in order that all of these can be sustainable.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was that as you were discussing the response to Councilmember Gilbert's question, you said that in essence, this is applying an execution rate such that in the organization, you're not pointing to any one position in particular and one set of duties, but you're saying that the overall personnel costs tend to fall short of a full complement of 43 sworn officers. So my question is that are you then, because you also are incorporating an execution rate across all 100 to 200 employees, are you adjusting that execution rate to account for the inclusion of this execution rate specific to the police department? Because it seems you might be double counting an execution rate there.
No, because this is just one position, and the other execution rate to which you accurately referred, which is 6%, is across the entire employee base. Any vacancies, and we have numerous ones that occur during the course of a fiscal year, that's a broader application of a vacancy rate versus this is a singular position, and I don't think they're any incompatible at all.
Okay, I don't want to belabor it, but I don't really understand how this isn't an execution rate for the police department, strictly the sworn officer component of the police department, which might be perhaps a fifth or so of all city employees.
Well, it's one position, and I'm saying that the execution rate is being, personnel is 70%, 73% of our expenditures, and so we have annually a large personnel expense with a fair number of vacancies that occur. We do our best to fill them all. Execution rate was being applied because historically this city and practically no city are at 100% filled positions in any given year. So that's why on a broader base, the execution rate, in my mind, applies to the entire organization. To choose to not fill one singular position in one department, I don't think impacts that.
Thank you for that, and I just want to make sure that it's clear in that when we're talking about the execution rate, we're basically talking about the general churn attrition rate of people naturally coming and going from employment within the city. And so whether you take one position away, it's not going to necessarily impact the rate of churn in terms of the vacancy rate that you may typically have. So when we're talking about, I know we're using the word execution rate for everything, but when we're talking about personnel, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about the attrition rate, kind of like the vacancy rate of positions that you're able to assume that at any given point in time, a proportion of your staff is going to be in transition, meaning you're going to have a certain proportion of vacant positions.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. So, put another way, the overall execution rate is not trickled down to each department specifically. It's the whole pool.
And it's an
Yeah,
estimate as well.
right.
We had, you might recall with the Raftellus consultant, the financial consultant, we discussed where that rate should be plugged. That's actually a bit of a conservative estimate to begin with. And we had different rates that we considered, say, for CIP. And this is personnel. I think, again, it's not there's no way to have perfect knowledge a year in advance what your vacancy, number of vacancies or duration of vacancies are going to be. The best we can do is look at historical data, as we've tried to do, and then be somewhat conservative with estimating something like an execution rate that would apply to the personnel category.
Thank you. So what I was going to say before was, so following up on the mayor's comment, so in summary, there were 3 positions that were funded through ARPA. Because one of them was already, half of it existed in the finance department. So that was 2.5 FTEs, quote, new. So then part of the way through the term, you've traded one of the positions out. So now we're down to 1.5, and then this covers the rest for the position, not the money. So if everybody buys your logic here, we've met the adjustment on the FTEs. The money for next year, still another 200,000 that needs to be identified to continue these positions permanently. Everybody understands that, and you have pledged twice, I've heard already tonight, that you're going to find a way to do that.
Yes.
Okay, I think I got it. Have I got it? That's kind of what I'm asking.
I think that everybody just wants it to be clear that we're talking about FY '28.
Yes, thank
And I
you.
want to encourage everybody to know that we got to get through the budget for FY '27. That's going to, we could be dealing with a whole new world come FY '28. Councilmember Wessel.
Thank you, and sorry. To make sure I understand that right, so we're saying that we're finding 250K roughly in savings this year if we do those changes. And then next year, when these positions would all be in the general fund, we're going to need another 198? Is that the right, the 198 is the number?
130, because some of the, we can also apply, that's one additional benefit of having identified some non-personnel related sustainable general fund costs, because that also helps towards the cause, so to speak. So 130, yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, in FY '27. Yeah, it's a smaller figure that, because again, I didn't want it to be completely tied to FTEs from the standpoint that, if we've got to find additional funds, and I do, it isn't always easy to find them in FTEs. That's why we continued to look and did, in fact, find 54,000 additional in sustainable savings for non-FTE type category, like the Microsoft license, the servers, and the success factor. So all of that goes towards the cause, so to speak, on a sustainable basis. And so the amount that we would need to find to supplement, to keep these positions sustainable would be less than that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak.
Yes, thank you very much, Manager Despirito. And also I was able to have another conversation about this earlier today, and I wanted to just share with my colleagues something that I hope you don't mind that I share. I think it might be useful to them. There are a variety of ways I think that you can look at the way that we're looking at this. I mean, one is is what is the percentage of personnel costs relative to the general budget over time. And we got some historical figures on FTE change, but I think it's quite important not to just look at FTEs over time. Now, we don't have all that data in front of us, but you threw out a number and you've just said it again. You know, between 70 to 73% of our overall budget are personnel. And again, we don't have those exactly except for this year, I think, right now in front of us. But it would be useful to take a look at that over time. And assuming that it hasn't changed substantially, then I would say we're roughly within the range of delivering similar, using a similar proportion of our budget on services versus personnel. And to me, that's one rational argument and another way to look at this than looking at the micro. And another interesting thing that you shared with me that I think is worth just putting this in a different way in your head is that Manager DeSpirito said, and please correct me if you feel I've misrepresented anything, is, you know, over the last 10 years or so, the council, not this council, but other councils have added positions that speak to certain values and priorities that the council had. So for example, we added a sustainability manager and some interns. I don't think the interns count towards the FTE. We added an economic development specialist to grow economic development efforts. We added a transit planner. We added a policy analyst, which was subsequently, removed, right? We added a grants manager that has ultimately paid for itself, right? And then a lot. And that requires more bodies to manage that money. And we added, I believe you said, a recreation program specialist of some sort. But anyway, I thought those are 5 different major buckets that we've added over time, speaking to our priorities. And I think during that time, I don't have the numbers, but I think we've also added quite substantially to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of grants that we're taking in. But I don't know what those numbers look like yet. If people feel like it's needed, we can ask for that. But anyway, I was trying to wrap my head around some of these numbers. And to me, that was a really helpful way to just sort of stew on the numbers and think about it versus just looking at FTEs and historical FTEs and what they mean to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. And I will say, in addition to our grants manager position, bringing in resources to the city, almost immediately after the addition of the economic development specialist, that person also brought in tons of money to the city in terms of state facade improvement grants that prior to them coming on board, we had never really had. And so, the same with sustainability. So we've been able to take advantage of the FTE so that they're able to bring in additional resources to the city to fund different programs throughout our community. I just want to check to see if there are any additional questions regarding ARPA. And then if not, then we can start moving the discussion towards the reconciliation spreadsheet and can start having some initial conversations about items that are already on the list.
So I just had a quick.
Councilmember Schlegel.
So thank you for that perspective, Councilmember Honzak. And I think maybe a distinction here is that the council affirmatively approved the creation of each of those positions. And in this process, we have positions that have been half created, and unless we affirmatively state it somehow, we are not going on record as having created these positions. They've kind of emerged, so.
That's not exactly true. Some of the positions that were added, meaning they were either added on to their tenure in terms of whether or not they were full-time or part-time. Many of them were actually developed in response to the city's ability to manage the $17 million that we received through the ARPA. So in many cases, those positions, they weren't just created through the sky, like they were actually created by the council to manage the
I
manage the
understand.
cost.
I mean, going forward, the positions as they're defined now, did we actually in a budget say, all right, we now want to have an IT IT management specialist? I may have the word.
Yeah, so what we said was that we wanted to make sure we were able to allocate funding to support the additional workload associated with ARPA. What we said I believe the resolution, Councilmember DeBala, keep me straight, is that these would be temporary positions in order to manage what was a 4 or 5 year kind of span of resources. What we have incrementally done, which is something that the city manager just talked through, which is there was a need to change the position of the policy analyst that was in the CM's office to move that FTE into what ultimately resulted in part of the ARPA manager's position being out of the general fund, and then the other piece being a part of ARPA funding. So there's been some movement of roles in FTE as a result of incremental decisions that had been made over time. And so the question I believe that is at hand right now is, what are we doing in terms of the expiring funds, of those ARPA funds, and how they may be embedded into positions that either existed prior to ARPA monies coming on board and we increasing the capacity of those roles, or how we're going to deal with the fact that even if there were new positions that were created, this council has stated that we don't want to expand our FTE count, that what we want to do is to give the city staff some flexibility to figure out how to identify long-term cost-cutting measures that could ultimately ensure that we're able to keep the staff that we think are really important. We don't want people to lose their jobs, but we also don't want to add to our FTE count, which is issue number one. And we also wanted to make sure that we were able to cover the permanent increase in costs of salary and benefits, which is issue number two. So it sounds like what staff has proposed for issue number one is to eliminate actually more than the equivalent FTE to cover the additional ARPA FTE count as a result of those ARPA funds expiring. And then the other piece is for this fiscal year, at least that we're talking about, there's been not only these cost-cutting measures associated with the FTEs that are being cut, but also other measures to cover the difference in the general fund attribution in terms of that half year of the ARPA funds. And so the next thing would be for FY28, again, I'm still trying to get through FY27. But when we get through FY28, the big thing will be making sure that they can find, again, the funds for that remaining half of the about $200,000 that would still be remaining in terms of those FTE costs. Councilmember DeBala?
The only thing I want to add is to your original question. So yes, when the change was made to have an acting deputy city manager and not have a policy analyst, yes, the council did approve that at that time.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to additional reconciliation items. I think we're going to bring out that handy-dandy spreadsheet. Is everybody ready to party? Let's take a look at it. Yep. Mhm. Sorry, give me 1 second.
So this is the reconciliation spreadsheet that we prepare for fiscal year 27. And I'm going to go over some of the staff initiated reconciliation items. And then we're going to have the councils looking at the items that is presented by the council, because there are some information that we received from the council. We're not so sure of the specific amount and the particular area that we need to increase or decrease expenditure. So I'm going to go through the staff initiated budget reconciliation items. First of all, we're looking at the general fund section. The one on the screen is the general fund revenue. That is in green. So the top line there, we have the general fund revenues. This is $32.8 million or $32.9 million is what is showing up in our general fund revenue, total revenue. And then there are some reconciliation items that we need to add. And this is because when we prepare our budget, it was around the time from the year end of fiscal year of 25, and then our items are added to the budget around February or March. So since March, there are some changes made to our revenue. So these items are reflected on this page. For the general fund, there is a decrease of crossing guard FTE adjustment, and this is provided to us by the county, and the decrease is $43,088. And in the road maintenance tax duplication, we have an increase of $65,407. In the park maintenance, we have an adjustment of $2,512. And these three items are all presented to us by the county through the tax duplication, okay? The other item is the library aid adjustment. In fiscal year 27, we're going to have an increase about $17,780. And also on the line item below, the accessible rate of 4.47 versus the estimated of 4%. So when I originally estimated the accessible rate increase, I was using a 4% increase for fiscal year 27. But when the constant use tax rate presented to us on February 14, we noticed that on the certificate, it shows the accessible base has an increase rate percentage of 4.47. So the difference between 4.47 and the 4% that I originally estimated is the dollar amount of $79,900 increase. So this is something that is showing an increase in our general fund revenue. And the total increase from the above all item is $122,520. Okay? And then we go down to the expenditure.
Oh, can we stick to the revenues really quickly? Councilmember Hanzak, you have a question on revenue?
Thank you so much, Director Chung. I think for me, most of them are straightforward, and I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, but could someone who is appropriate explain the library aid adjustment, please?
The library adjustment was provided to me by the library director, and she received information from the county that this adjustment is going to be presented to us. There is an increase of $17,780 in the year of fiscal year 27. So it's an increase from 26.
I guess, thank you. I've got the numbers. I'm wondering if someone can explain why the change. And if not now, maybe later.
Director Chung, correct me if I'm wrong. Library aid is dollars that we get from the county to support the library's function. And this increase is representative of a actual estimate that we received from the county versus the projections that were included in the original FY27 budget.
Correct. It's similar to the tax duplication. It's information provided by the county to us to let us know the next fiscal year we will have that amount increase.
And I just want to make sure, because I'm not as familiar with the library aid, is it similar to tax dupe in that tax duplication in no way, quite frankly, relates to how much money we spend on these things? It relates more to what the county, if they were to provide their version of services to us for in that area, how much it would cost them, right? So is the library aid
similar or no?
It's similar to the text duplication, but the more detailed information I need to refer to the library director.
Director Jones,
not-
are you available virtually?
Yes, I am. The funding formula is actually based on it's based on a number of factors, but it's actually calculated based on fiscal year 26's property values. So our annual payment is essentially a formula that they apply to county revenues, and then we get a specific percentage of it. So it's not based on our expenditures or anything. We actually had a hearing this morning with the Education and Culture Committee with County Council, and that new figure was reiterated. The council members that were present said that they fully expected that number to go through as approved because it is based on real values calculated for fiscal year 26.
Okay, thank you. That is very helpful. I'm hoping that folks don't play around with our tax dupe numbers as well. And the crossing guard FTE, that adjustment or that decrease was, and folks remind me, because I know we had a lot going on with the crossing guard counts from the prior year, where there was an error there so that it's showing that there's a decrease, but it was because we had an increase because of what happened in the prior year. I just want to make sure that that's what we're actually showing here.
Yeah, I think there was a higher increase in fiscal year 26 for the crossing guard revenue. So this reduction is to reflect the normal crossing guard increase in the year. Because of the 26 extra increase, the county has to remove certain amount from the crossing guard tax duplication to even out the regular crossing guard application to us.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there was an error. And
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I believe for 25, so we were cut short for 25. We advocated, and they gave us our money in 26. And now what we're looking at is that decrease where we're going back to where we should have been the whole time.
Exactly.
Okay,
The
perfect.
amount just level out for the extra increase in fiscal year 26.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. Are there any other questions? We're not going to talk about council-specific proposals just yet. We're going to get through the staff proposals first.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's go to expenditures.
Okay, and the general fund expenditure, we start with the general fund total expenditure of $34.9 million or $35 million. So in the general fund operating support, we're putting in an increase of staff overtime needed for the election. So this is a request from our city clerk division, and the amount is for $6,000 because this fiscal year 27 is the election year. We need extra staff to handle all the extra work in the election. The second increase is the salary for the senior accounting specialist position, which is the half FTE, and is proposed by the city manager. The increase for the salary is $38,533. The fringe benefit amount is also for half FTE of the senior accounting specialist position, which is $23,831. And because of the original proposal by the city manager, we were trying to remove this half-time finance position. The city manager proposed to have a half-time temporary staff contract to substitute for the half-time position in the finance, and that cost is $50,000. So it's a net out about $38,500 plus 23,000 minus 50,000, and that is the net increase from our original proposed budget. Any question about that?
Okay, this is a moment where I'm like, okay, walk me through this like I'm two, Director Chung.
Yeah.
I want to make sure this math is mathing for me.
So-
So the overtime for the elections made perfect sense. I do have a question for our city clerk about that in terms of whether or not there's any additional contracting, contract fees or anything like that that the Board of Election may need. I know that they met recently. We don't have to talk about it tonight, but I know it related to, I shared with them the 2 versus the 4-year and kind of the resolution of where we left things to kind of figure out whether or not there's any additional resources that they need as well. So is that election overtime just for staff? It doesn't include any additional needs of the Board of Election?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's fine. We could follow up with them, and I know that that's a call out for them. Okay, and so for the salary for the senior accounting specialist, like this half FTE, I feel like I'm seeing a bunch of half FTEs, and it seems like to me we're increasing by a half FTE, but I could be totally wrong by that. So walk me through, it seems like there's so you have separate line items. So it's 1/2 FTE. You have one line item for their salary, a second line item for their fringe benefits. And that 1/2 FTE is being accounted for through the decrease in the contract, the finance contract.
Yes. During the proposed budget, the city manager did not include the senior accounting specialist half position in the proposal. So this amount of the salary and the fringe benefit, it's included in his proposal earlier, okay? It's included in his proposal earlier. And now, but the temporary contract in the finance department were to compensate for the loss of the FTE in the finance department, because we need a full-time person to handle the job in the finance. If we were removing this position, there has to be someone to do the job. So this 50,000 is something that the city manager proposed to compensate for the loss of this position. But today, as the city manager proposed, our senior accounting specialist position is retained because he found extra savings in the contract costs for that 54,000. So that's why he proposed to have this position retained in the finance department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala needs to hear that again.
So let me repeat back to you, make sure I got this right.
Sure.
So there was a while ago, there was a half of an FTE, and then there was not enough capability. So there was some ARPA money used for the other half. So we get to this budget year, and what was originally in the budget year, in the budget, was a half an FTE plus $50,000. Okay.
Now, in my original proposal that went out to all in March, I had proposed that the second half of the fiscal year, that finance position would go away. Okay. So that's the 0.5, okay? And for that half a year, it was going to be necessary to have a temp to cover the necessary amount of work that position performs, and thus 50,000 had been proposed is temporary contract services. And now I have modified my proposal such that found a way that we could keep this necessary, what I consider this necessary position, and yes, there's some additional cost, which will be offset with the other personnel savings that we talked about a number of moments ago. And the 50,000 can come out if it's ultimately council's pleasure to fund the position. There will no longer be a need for a half year's worth or $50,000 worth of temporary contract expense.
Okay, so what I said that was wrong was, so this was, your original proposal that we all got was half a year using the ARPA money and then the temp to cover the second half. Now we're essentially trading out, you're proposing to trade out the temporary money and cover the second half of the year.
But I'm not utilizing the 50,000 per se. I mean, it's illustrating as a,
Right.
these are adds and deletes, but the temporary contract wasn't one of the, what I would call one of the sustainable savings.
Right.
The sustainable savings are contained in the 1 FTE from the police department, the 0.5 in the pooled part-time hours from rec and communications, as well as the 54,000 in contracts that we no longer have to carry. Those are sustainable general fund savings.
Thank you for that clarification.
That would be the that would be the identified offset for retaining the FTE for the second half of FY27.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Going forward, we're going to talk about the capital improvement program. So as evaluated by the fleet committee, there will be an increase of $1,000 for the vehicle maintenance van. The original cost on our capital improvement program, it was $58,000, and now the cost of this vehicle maintenance van is $59,000. So there is a $1,000 increase in the reconciliation. The second item is a decrease of police vehicle purchase. As recommended by the fleet committee, police department will only purchase 2 vehicles instead of 4 vehicles. The total cost of 4 vehicle, it was $320. Now we're reducing it to 2 vehicles, so we are reducing the cost of our police purchase vehicle from $320 to $160,000. Okay? And then going forward, I will go down to other staff items. And in the unassigned reserve, the original unassigned reserve balance at the proposed budget is $5.8 million, okay? And the rest of the items are reconciliation items proposed by Councilman Strego and Councilman Lemon. In the assigned reserve for fiscal year 26, ending balance is $3 million, $55,068. There are items that is proposed by Councilman Strego and Lemon. The numbers will have to be identified, and we need to find out what those item amount would be. So going down to the next is the stormwater. Stormwater revenue, stormwater expenditure. The expenditure for stormwater, the original expenditure balance is $1,018,609, and we are reducing the capital improvement for the project. This is a proposed item by Councilman Strego and Lemon. And going down to the special revenue fund, there are 2 items that are proposed by the staff. The special revenue fund revenue, the original total in the proposed budget is $688,318. Finance department noticed that the cable grant equipment revenue was not included in the special revenue fund. So in this reconciliation, we're adding $129,500 to the cable grant equipment revenue. So it's an addition to the revenue. And in the second item is the HCD proposed to have $60,000 decrease for the revenue of the program open space. It was a discrepancy that we found out during the CIP reconciliation that this $60,000 was not supposed to be in the included in the expenditure. So for special revenue, when you remove the expenditure from the special revenue fund, we have to neutralize it by removing the revenue as well. So since the expenditure for $60,000 was removed by HCD, we have to remove this $60,000 revenue as well. Okay?
Councilmember Honzak, were we able to figure out why the discrepancy? What happened, or is it? I mean, is it a simple mathematical error, or is there some other explanation?
It was just.
And I mean, I just want.
It was just a change of program by the county or by the. So I think our HCD director has to explain why there is a removal of this open space program in the fiscal year 27 budget.
Mr.
Yeah.
McNally.
Madam Mayor and Council, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right. Yes. So originally we had hoped to use this funding to assist Public Works with purchasing some properties in the city from WSSC. And that's what we originally put in for this specific grant program. We were not able to come to an agreement with WSSC, and so we can't spend those funds. We're currently reworking kind of how we'll spend those funds, but it won't happen in this fiscal year. So once we have kind of a new program for those funds, we'll then bring forward a budget amendment to add things back in, but that won't be until we're completely squared away, because we have to get the county to sign off on it, and then the State Board of Estimates.
Thank you.
And going down to the next funding is the red light camera and stop sign camera expenditure. The original expenditure was $3.4 million. There are some proposals that actually adjusted the red light camera expenditure, and it's mainly because of the position. Originally, the corporate position was supposed to be a cost transfer from the general fund to the stop sign and the red light camera fund. But as the city manager just proposed, it is going to be a permanent removal of this position. So that's why we have to reduce the expenditure of the cost of this because of this personnel savings. And this total cost for personnel savings is $181,000, and that includes the salary of one corporate position, which is $89,840. Fringe benefit of that position is $70,576. The overtime for this vacant position is $19,671. And also there is a clothing allowance for $1,750. So the total of all these 4 different line items, it should equal to $181,000. And that is a permanent removal from the red light and stop sign camera fund expenditure.
Okay.
Okay. The next item is also proposed by the police department, is the reduction of the armory project from the stop sign camera CIP. And that item cost is $40,000 even. And there is also a reduction of blood drying cabinet from the stop sign camera CIP. And that item costs $14,000. And these above 6 items are proposed by the police department. And that concludes my staff reconciliation items. And the remaining 2 items are related to ARPA funding. And the ARPA funding expenditure for fiscal year 27, that $193,720 represent the personnel costs of the ARPA manager, deputy city manager's position, the senior accounting specialist position, as well as the IT specialist position in the ARPA fund. Okay? This is the expenditure in the ARPA fund.
It looks like it's off by a little bit, because what was in the presentation was like 198.
198 is the amount that is in the general fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the amount in the ARPA.
In the ARPA fund.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right?
Can I ask you one question? And
Sure,
I'm sorry, we got to go all the way back to the cars that we are delaying. Let me finish my question. So I'm not seeing the equipment replacement reserve, and when I look at the, in the spreadsheet, and when I'm looking at the CIP, it looks like all of the police, unless I'm missing something. So this looks like it is a decrease in the expenditures, in the general fund, but it looks like, unless I'm missing something, in the capital improvement, looks like all of the police cars are being funded out of the ERR.
Yes.
So should there be, like, so if we're saying we're going to, are we saying we're delaying the purchase, or we're just not purchasing at all? I'm trying to understand why.
I believe they are not purchasing it, and this reduction should be taken out from the ERR.
Okay, that's what I needed to
Should be
be
taken
clear.
out from
Yeah,
the ERR.
yeah, 'cause
So
I'm-
I will make a note and make sure that it is a removal from the ERR, because these two items belongs to ERR.
to the ERR.
Yeah.
And because I'm not seeing in the spreadsheet where there is a section for the ERR.
We don't usually have a ERR funding balance, but I will add it this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dabala, your question about ARPA.
Yeah, thank you. So if there is a difference between the revenues and expenditures, however small, is there a plan for spending it?
The ARPA funding, yeah, that difference is $50,000 in the interest received, the interest in the checking account, and it's usually maintained in the fund balance. So the fund balance, there is no regulation according to the Treasury. We can always maintain that fund balance
Okay, great.
for our own use. Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation.
All right. So I think that's all the questions
Thank
we
you.
have for the city staff.
right.
Now we're going to move to council items, reconciliation items. There's no, I just want to say there's no pressure. If, as a result of some of the conversations that have happened today, you want to hold off on discussing an item, you're free to do so. But you can start walking through your proposed items. Council members may ask questions of what's being proposed, so that we can continue to make progress in terms of understanding potential adjustments that folks want to raise. So Councilmember Schlegel and Landman, I see that you have a number of items, if you want to walk through your items.
Okay, are we moving through the, in the order that they're listed? Is that how you want to do this?
It's easier to walk through them for spreadsheet purposes. It's easier if we could walk through them in terms of how they're listed with the funds in the spreadsheet.
Okay, just in the interest of time, it was, I guess it was yesterday that we shared this handout with you. So has everyone been able to review that so that I'm not talking through things? Okay. Well, just as a starting point, the general principles that Councilmember Landman and I had in mind in bringing these forward were But we want to make sure to fulfill council budget priorities. So in every case, the proposal, as you can see in the table in the handout, is checked against what was in Resolution 2025-40. Secondly, in cases where there were still questions that had not been fully explained, in our view, we wanted to freeze the spending, which isn't the same as absolutely canceling the spending. The third was that we wanted to exercise reasonable fiscal prudence, as that is a council priority for fiscal sustainability. And the fourth was that we stick to the plan but adjust for emergent conditions, as we've been talking about in a number of work sessions and presentations this year, the unprecedented conditions that our community is facing. And the last was that we try to require measurable goals wherever reasonable. Some of the things that I had been thinking of in relation to number 5, they may come up in terms of proposals to freeze pending clear measurable goals. And in other cases, I think it's just a discussion with management to propose having over the course of the next year. So I'm trying to see here.
Shall we start with the recommendation that the revenues, we're looking at the.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm asking. I'm just asking for you all to go through the spreadsheet, what we're showing, and talk through your items and explain what you're proposing.
I'll pass it off to you, Councilmember Landman, because I'm having a hard time finding my spot in the.
Yep.
I'm looking at what's on your screen, and I'm looking at the same. So where it says now, our recommendation was to increase the commercial occupancy license fee using a metric based upon the commercial license fee that was in place in 2000, and I think it was, I can't remember the starting year.
It was in place through 2000, FY 2007.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Which we have had an inventory tax that was eliminated and have not yet figured out where the replacement for that funding was going to be. So we are reverting to the commercial occupancy license fee, suggesting that it be readjusted with an inflation factor based on the difference between what it would be, what it was when eliminated, and what it would be in this year. So that the dollar amount that it says here, amount requires research, we did have to revert back to the staff to say, look at those commercial occupancy license fees, make the calculus of what it would be adjusted for inflation, and include that as a revenue source, because we are hoping that in fiscal 2027 that we can re-establish that licensing fee as a reasonable source of additional revenue. And in part, this is because we haven't yet had success in adopting other creative funding mechanisms that we hope that the MML legislation will one day enable us to do. And the second item on here is to increase the utility tax to mirror the highest utility tax that we found among municipalities in Montgomery County, which I believe was Kensington. Our current utility tax is $1.75 per whatever the unit is, and I apologize, I don't remember. And we don't see any reason why we shouldn't be up there with the higher end on that, because we have very aging utilities. We don't really get very good, I'll say services from the utilities in addressing the concerns that we have. And we know that the cost of this will be spread equitably across all utility users and not be borne by the residents of Tacoma Park. So we will feel the pinch only minimally, but we will experience the increase in revenues maximally. So it is a significant jump, and we need the help of the staff to do the calculation and what that dollar figure would be, but we want to use the dollar amount in terms of the fee based upon other municipalities in Montgomery County as our benchmark.
And just to tie it back to the priorities resolution, we did in December call for the city manager to clarify the impact of modifications to the commercial property tax rate, and also clarify the impact of modification to the utility tax rate. So if it is the case that wasn't possible to do to this point, we're proposing these as things to do for this year, at least for this year, yeah.
Any questions around revenues?
Questions, comments, is that, comments are also welcome?
Comments are welcome.
Okay. All right, thanks. Regarding, I appreciate you all working on proposals to increase revenues. I think that's always an admirable effort to give that a go. I think we would all love to see more diversity. I personally just want to express that I'm extremely opposed to increasing the commercial occupancy license fees because of a phenomenon that I see, at least in my ward, that would go directly against the sort of principles that I'm trying to achieve of getting more businesses to get occupied. And the last thing I want to see happen is to discourage commercial occupancy in our city as compared to other sites that folks could pick. I understand you're talking about, we got rid of the commercial inventory tax. So I want to invite my colleagues who know more about the inventory tax to speak to why the inventory tax was eliminated.
I will just quickly clarify that we are suggesting that if it's feasible, we could graduate that fee based on the size of the business, like perhaps by square footage, so that smallest businesses might not see much of a hit at all. Yeah.
I hear you, but at this point, I've just watched one of our longtime businesses close. 2 more business spaces are open, seem to get any occupancy. 3. And it's going in a worse direction than a better. So I think the nominal fees are actually exactly where it's at. I'm concerned about that. I can understand that we might be interested in attempting to seek revenues from some of the wealthiest businesses, if there is such a thing, in Tacoma Park. But to me, this works against our quest for economic development within the city.
And I can speak to the elimination of the personal property or the inventory tax for businesses. What actually occurred was there were very small, because of how that tax is calculated, there's a very small type of business entity that would be required to make a payment. So basically, if you were a business that had stock, is what you were being taxed on. You were being taxed on your stock. So, for example, Pretty, the jewelry store that is in the Crossroads area, was paying an enormous amount to the city in terms of their that inventory tax, because they sell jewelry and they have stock of jewelry and they were being taxed on their stock. So it wasn't necessarily the case that the restaurants and all businesses were paying this this tax. It was only for those businesses that had stock, and it wasn't a very equitable approach to trying to solicit revenues from the business area. And one of the things that we really tried to push was also economic development as well. And so, what were to stop a business like Pretty's from just crossing the street and being in Prince George's County where that tax did not exist. And so that was one of the reasons why the prior council decided to eliminate that that tax, because it somewhat put us at a disadvantage, particularly as it related to our largest commercial district in the Crossroads area, where it was a lot easier for folks to kind of move around into unincorporated Montgomery County or into Prince George's County.
As a follow-on to that, what did the council say they were going to do next? Wasn't there some, memo to self that the council was going to revisit this?
There were some council members that wanted to Devin, did you want to speak, or?
As I recall, Madam Mayor, there was a commitment on the part of the council to find an alternative revenue source that would generate an equal quantity of revenue, but that was never accomplished at the time, and to my knowledge has never been taken up again by subsequent councils.
Well, I think that was a compromise. I will say that while we have not identified a revenue stream, I will say the amount of work that we've been doing since having our economic development manager and the amount of state funds that have been brought in as a result of some of the other work that we've done to support our businesses also helps. So while we didn't come up with an alternative, we also have to keep in mind that that was done, and then we had COVID, which impacted our businesses tremendously. And now, quite frankly, I just came from speaking in the Crossroads, and they're also experiencing a huge hit because of immigration enforcement in terms of their customer base, and that's our largest commercial district. So to at this time say, hey, we want to try to figure out some way to come up with additional revenues for these businesses that ultimately it will be a trickle down, I think is not appropriate for us to do right now. I think that there are some ways that we can encourage development or economic development. I think we do need to expand our tax base. I don't think adding additional fees and taxes of businesses that, quite frankly, from what I've heard, are already struggling right now is the way to go. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. On the utility tax, somebody remind me, I thought we raised it last year.
We did raise it by 30 cents for FY '26.
Okay, so we raised it by 30 cents, and did we hear a lot of hue and cry on that?
Staff has not received any comments about the
all right.
utility tax increase.
So I think $5 is a really huge leap, but I would not object to seeing some numbers on another small increase.
And
That's just me.
Director Chung, it was 30 cents, correct?
I can't remember what it was in the first place.
Yes, our original, we have maintained a tax rate of the utility tax of 1.45 for many, many years.
Yeah, that's
In
what I-
fiscal year 26, we increased 3 cents, so it become 1.75.
Got it. Okay. So that's my view on that. On the commercial occupancy license, I admit I don't remember what we did before 2008, and I might need, before taking this in any way seriously, I might need a refresher course on what it is and who pays it, because I don't think I know. And to the point of adding something to this is not a great time. On the other hand, there doesn't seem to, since I've been on the council, there doesn't ever seem to be a great time. So I'd like to see more about it. But what I'm wondering, if it makes more sense to say this is a big research project. More importantly, it's not something you do without consulting the business community. And so maybe this is, if we have a list of things we want the staff to look into over the course of the next year, this would be one of them.
And thank you, that's a perfect segue. I just did want to speak a little bit about the level of research that will be required for these two items. So the commercial occupancy license fee, it's not just an increase, it would be a re-implementation of a fee that has not existed for 20 years. So needless to say that the majority
bigger
of
deal.
city staff are unaware of why it was sunset and what the impact would be if it returns. And so we would have to do some just background research into that, as well as figure out, and this would require some input from Councilmember Slagle and Lamon specifically, but council at large, to determine if the former way that the commercial occupancy license fee was structured is exactly what we want to see moving forward, and if there's any kind of nuance to the way that council is thinking about that, some kind of scenario analysis is something that we would engage with you all with. So there's a bit of background research that would be necessary to kind of figure out why it existed, why it was gone, why it was retired, and then what kind of revenue this would generate in a subsequent budget year. Regarding the utility tax, the primary research that would be necessary to figure out the revenue amount would be going back to the archives to determine the latest assessment that was provided to the city for the institutions that are charged that fee. And so we just have to go back to the archives to figure out where what assessed value there is for the few institutions that this would apply to. That would get us an amount. And then the second question, to Councilmember Slagle's point, would be about impact. We do have a general sense of what the impact would be. We know that the likelihood that those additional costs to the utility would be passed on to residents is high. The one bit of confusion, and we have an assumption, but we would need to confirm the assumption, is whether or not that additional fee would be charged specifically to Tacoma Park residents, which I think is unlikely, or would it be the broader service constituents of whoever the utility tax applies to? So that would be the one piece that we would have to clarify on the impact side.
And then my last comment is just a personal comment, having been around when the commercial property tax was removed for all the reasons of equity that the mayor just described. Some of us did have in mind that there might be some minimal commercial property tax, and we were starting to research that, and COVID, there was no way that we could pursue considering that. And since then, this council considered it last year, so that's kind of what happened there, as far as I remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Deputy Director Eubanks, when we were talking, I was taking a look at the increases in assessments, particularly among some of the commercial properties. Has there, and I could probably just look this up, in terms of the commercial assessable tax base, have we seen an increase in terms of the overall for our commercial properties? I think that might be in the budget. I could just flip to the back. I think we used to have a page on that, but I'm not sure.
I will defer to Director Chung. Director Chung, have we seen a increase in our commercial assessed property tax value from one year to another? And then I also learned today, and correct Chung, if you could speak to this too, that there's a separate assessed value for utilities and railroads that is separate from property tax assessments.
That is correct. So we have about a handful of utility companies that the city provide the assessable value. For example, like PEPCO and some other bigger companies, and they are not more than 10 of them. But the assessable value is a very strange thing. It's not like the property tax or the real property tax. It's always going up. The assessable value for the utility tax, they usually go down and sometimes go up, so it fluctuates a little bit. So increasing the rate, of course, will help the revenue increase. And at the same time, if the assessable value is going up. But in case when the assessable value goes down, then the increase of tax rate will have little to help with the rate increase. I believe last time when we increased the rate of 30 cents, the actual revenue increase is less than $5,000. So we're not sure. I mean, it makes sense to increase to a higher limit, but the minimal revenue that we receive from utility tax is less than $250,000 per year. So with the tax rate increase, we hope that we'll have a moderate increase in our revenue for utility tax.
So the assessable value that I'm referring to is the one specific to utility tax, not the general property tax for commercial properties.
It's not the same, yeah.
And the accessible value, the accessible property values for the commercial, for commercial properties, are we splitting that out?
We have a file that is sent by the county. I can look at that to see if we can compare that with the last year, if there's any increase in our accessible value for commercial property tax.
That would be really helpful,
Sure.
because I was just looking at the maps with the assessments, and I was like, wait a minute, some of these went up a lot. So it would be helpful for me to get a better
We
understanding.
have a file that is usually sent to us at the beginning of the year from Montgomery County that includes all the real property accessible rate, accessible value. So I can compare the fiscal year 26 versus the fiscal year 25 to see the actual value increase.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, particularly for
sure.
commercial properties, and I'm really focused on, the New Hampshire Ave corridor and
Yeah.
of course Old Town, because,
So it's between 25 and 26.
yeah, one question I have is whether or not
Mayor, if I
they're
could ask a point of information on this. My understanding is that the commercial property tax, the assessed value of the property, that there is a difference between what the property would be valued at sale and what the taxation is based upon, which is based upon the income of the commercial properties. And so in evaluating whether there have been changes in the assessed value of the property, is it the same question to ask that versus what their taxation is based upon their income from the properties, which is what I gather the calculation is made from for taxes placed on commercial properties. If I'm wrong about that, Director Chung or Mr. Eubanks, maybe you could clarify. But I've been trying to understand why our revenues seem so modest from the commercial properties that we have, given how much land they own. And it seems to be because it's not the value of the land or the improvements, but the value of the income derived from it, for which they could take all kinds of deductions for depreciation, et cetera.
The
Maybe-
specific circumstances under which SDAT decides which method of assessment they are going to use for any particular property, we can't comment on, just because we aren't familiar with the nuance. You're right, Councilmember Landman, that there are three approaches that SDAT can take when assessing property, particularly income-producing property. You have the sales method, you have the income method, and you have the replacement method. For some portion of commercial properties, the income method is used. We don't know specifically which properties are an assessor would use an income method for and which they might use the sale method. But you are right in that there is some discretion at the SDAT level for how they make that determination.
Well, it seems to me that if you're saying that we have no say in it, I think it would be helpful to understand whether, I know that when we had low assessments in, I think part of Ward 6 that had once been part of Prince George's County, we did go to SDAT and ask that they consider reevaluating those assessments. And we know that we have some very large, wealthy, BF Saul's scale property owners in our city. And if the assessment methodology being used in that part of the city, particularly if it's also formerly Prince George's County, so maybe there were different attitudes about the assessors, it would seem that it might be valuable for us to investigate whether it's the most advantageous for us, the method that's being used, and to understand that. Unless it's some sort of, national secret that they don't have to reveal to us and they don't have to discuss with us. Could that potentially be productive with us if we focus on the very large scale pieces of property owned by major national chains like BF Saul? This would be a way of increasing our revenue from commercial properties without us having to do the licensing or fees, and it would only really have a significant impact on the really large property owners, I would imagine.
If that is a question for city staff, we could always have further conversations with SDAT about their process.
Right. I think one of the things that we should also, I personally just think it's important for us to not just think about taxation of a particular area,
Also because the Tacoma Langley Crossroads CDA also requires businesses to pay into that in that area. So if you're gonna talk about taxation, let's not focus on just one part of the city that used to be in Prince George's County. If you're going to talk about taxation, then you're also talking about Old Town. You're talking about some other places too.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, you're right. I mentioned those because there are these very large companies that own properties in certain areas, and that was my motivation. But your point is well taken, and I appreciate your friendly amendment, so to speak, to my suggestion.
Yeah. But I do still think that it would be helpful, at least, even though we don't know which method they might have chosen to take in terms of determining the tax, it still would be really helpful for me. I used to see it in the back of the budget book where you could kind of see the differences between like the largest parcels that were paying the most taxes, the highest taxes, and what those properties were. You could also see the change in terms of the commercial accessible rate and the actual amount of revenues received. Yeah, that would be helpful for me to kind of see that breakdown so I can get a better idea of where we are in terms of the revenues that we're bringing in from the commercial properties.
Sure, I'll provide that by the next 2 days.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It used to be in the budget. It used to be a page in there. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Mayor Searcy and Councilmember Honzak talked about with being extremely hesitant to add any kind of taxes to our current businesses. But I agree with them on that. But I did want to say for this, the commercial occupancy license, hearing a bit about it, knowing it was so long ago, I would imagine there'd be considerable cost to start up a program like that. So, I doubt that the juice is worth the squeeze, at least in the very short term, because it would require building a program that doesn't exist anymore. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Councilmember Honzak.
Yes, I would value being able to see the commercial property values and how they may have changed. But I just wanted to say that, you know, if we think about what's going on with the purple line, no matter what method is currently being used to assess the values, I think there's no chance that the value of the properties, however they're being assessed, is going up. And so, you know, how quickly, I don't know, but if we look at probably the last 5 years or even the next 2 years, you know, it's going to be going up because of the purple line, especially in Ward 5 and in Ward 6, which incidentally means, this means that the costs on some level are going to have to be passed off to the business owners in order, I mean, that's just the way that good businessmen do business. If you own the property, you know, you're going to pass it off to your renter. And so, I mean, to add on a further cost on top of that for those two particular wards in particular, that really gives me a lot of concerns. It even would give me a lot of concern in Ward 1, just because we don't have a lot of change going on in that space right now. If anything, there's maybe a negative change because of people's incomes being hit and small businesses getting the trickle down. So I don't think this is the year to consider this. Anyway, I've already made my point. And regarding the utility tax, it's not much money. Then again, it's like, why not try to get some money where you can get some juice? But I would like to know what the risk is. And I don't know, I'd be open. I'm actually open to going up substantially on this when we went up last year, but I have no idea what the risks are to anything. If it's spread over the county, it's my recollection that last year when we made this decision, we actually did make it, I think, because it was being passed off to the whole county as per our understanding. If there's a way to quickly figure out, I don't know how they felt about the last change, and then, you know, without getting feathers too ruffled and drawing too much attention to ourselves, I mean, hey, why not move up to the rate of a municipality that's at the top of the range? But I just don't know enough about it. So if it takes too much effort, I say it's not worth $5,000 of somebody's time to research it. But I think, you know, why not?
I'm just gonna do a quick time check. So we're almost at 10 o'clock. Would folks be amenable for us to move on to the expenditure section
'cause
so
I
that we
could-
can have the conversation about
Just
that?
to close out, because I think this is, if that's all right, Madam Mayor, very briefly, I think this has been a really helpful discussion. I would encourage colleagues to continue to consider the utility tax increase because we are the oldest municipality in terms of our infrastructure in the county, and we also do have to repair our own roads, and there's a lot of staff time spent on following up with utilities when there's damage to roads. On the other one, I truly appreciate, this is like a great example of dialogue on the dais and thinking about the differences between the northern neighborhoods in this city, commercial districts, and the southern ones. And just for your awareness, I'm not trying to double down on an argument, but the perspective of residents who are near Old Town or the Junction is often that they, in effect, pay more because of the success of the businesses, because there's this impact on parking. So then they need to have parking districts and parking permits, and they pay every year for that. And so they see thriving businesses in Old Town, and they're wondering, they're so happy that they're there, but they're also wondering whether they too are contributing to, the city services that they benefit from. So, yeah.
Great. All right, let's move on to expenditures. Okay. Let's start with Councilmember DeBala. We're just going to go down the list, and then we'll pick back up with Councilmember Schlegel and Lamb. And Councilmember DeBala.
Okay, so I'm assuming that, and it seems to be the case so far, that there's a lot of sort of smaller movements in the proposed budget this year. And so if there turns out to be available revenue, I would like us to consider programs that directly serve the public that have been level funded, if not cut a little bit, over the last few years in order to keep the overall picture intact. And so Tree Tacoma, we heard during the presentation that the money available from the tree fund is going to be half of what it was last year, and I think the year before. Not sure about that part. And so I'm suggesting that, given the demand that there is for trees, that we consider restoring that money from the general fund, which would be up to $45,000. Same thing with recreation special events. That line item, if you went to the egg hunt, if you went to the Halloween parade, and Monster Bash, you know what I'm talking about. These serve hundreds, if not 1,000 residents, and they're oversubscribed in terms of it's just way too crowded because there's not enough activities and help going on. So I'm suggesting that a little bit of money there could go a really long way. Engineering support in terms of instead, because we've talked about whether we need and can afford an FTE in engineering to help all the work that's going on, and we've I think as a council concluded that adding FTEs is not in the cards right now, but contract dollars could help, I believe, and I would need cost estimates on these from all of from the different departments rather than my guessing. And we talked about grants for immigrant support and food insecurity. We have a proposal for a significant increase in that category. If we have a little spare money, it wouldn't hurt me to put a little more in there. Again, library programming and materials. We have a new library. The staff is, as you've heard, stretched thin. They've got a lot of creative ideas now that they're not worried about construction, and it would be a way to take advantage of that energy and the increase in people who are coming to the library, in some cases after a long time, and in some cases for the first time, to help grab them and and make them regular library users. So in summary, it's just a few quick things that, and why I'm proposing them. And what I would ask of the city staff is to fill in some of the numbers here and help, maybe ranges instead of solid dollar numbers. So we have a little play available, a little play in the system when we get that far, see how much we actually have available to, if any, to put into some of these areas. Questions, comments? And after I remember the list, I thought of two more, but we don't need to go to that tonight.
Councilmember Schlegel, did you have a comment?
One comment was that we, I think Councilmember Lehman and I elsewhere have identified that there could be something in the range of 45 or 50,000 in unspent interest from, I believe it's ARPA, that might be made available for some of these.
It was the interest that had been accrued on the $3 million in
Oh, yeah, in the assigned reserves, yes.
assigned reserve, that we, rather than have that be replaced back into the assigned reserve, raising the assigned reserve from 3 million to 3,055,000 this year, that 55,000 be used for the types, the exact, I think, duplicate of the list of the suggestions from Councilmember DeBala, all of which, where the money would go as among those different, programs. I think that, that's something for a helpful discussion among council members, but in principle, I know I can speak for myself and Councilmember Schlegel can speak for himself, but I think that the programs that are directly serving, especially serving people who are more vulnerable and less and are lower income, such as the programs in the library, the program in the rec department, programs of the rec department, for which we have revenue losses by offering scholarships, which I fully support. Those are the places where that $55,000 ought to go as a starting point for supporting these modest increases, which would serve people's needs directly.
At some point, when we get to that item on your list, Councilmember Schlegel, I would like someone to explain to me the interest on the 3 million and what happens to it, because until I read your list, I wasn't aware that was even a thing that we could be concerned with. But thank you for that, Councilmember Lamon.
And I'll just close out what I was saying, just to say that I think that it's always a good idea if you can find a way to move forward faster on environmental things. I really respect what you're saying about the recreation special events, and with all these items, I think it's worth considering what do we know right now about what the additional needs are in terms of like for Treat Tacoma, maybe we don't need 45, but we wouldn't want the program to wither, because people were like, oh, I don't think they're doing that anymore. So yeah, to knowing how much is needed would be helpful, but we're short on time, I know.
One question I do have, Councilmember DeBala, the immigrant support and food insecurity, can staff remind me of how much we perhaps might have already added for the immigrant support services, the food insecurity work, I think it was I felt like we might have put some extra funds there. If we could just double check.
We did, I don't remember how much.
Yep.
Community quality of life.
Community quality of
Director
life.
McNally, what's your budget for FY27?
Yeah, the community quality of life proposed budget is $250,000. It was, I believe, 110 this year. So it's a pretty significant increase.
And this was the increase in the amount that the committee recommended as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I was assuming that was going through.
Okay.
In this category of things that are helpful, I just realized that nobody else has yet proposed increases in emergency assistance if we were too liberal, make a set of short-term exceptions while we have Director McNally on the line. Maybe that's an area he could look into. We talked about it last week or the week before. But I would have put it on my list if I'd realized nobody else had, to get an estimate there of what might be useful if we were to do that. So I can write that up formally, and I'm just mentioning it while we're on the topic.
We received a question. I provided a response back to the city manager just today, so they haven't had a
Stay
chance
tuned.
to look at it, but
Okay.
that will be coming.
All right, great, thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember DeBala, Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. 2 points. For the funding for the community quality of life grants, I remember that the committee specifically asked for 250,000 and would gladly welcome and use more. I feel like that was how they framed it. It was very, please at least give us 250, which already is a huge jump, and we could use even more than that. So I agree with the thinking Councilmember DeBala is having, that if there is extra money to put there, it could be used. And similarly, I'm really in support of adding to the rec special events and programs, particularly because the ones we're talking about are specifically events for families with kids, young kids. Like that's who turns out for Monster Bash and for the Easter egg hunt. And we have such high demand. So I think that the more we can support those to be there for our families for these events, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Okay, seeing no more additional lights for Councilmember DeBala's items. The next set of items are Councilmember Schlegel and Landman.
Okay, I'll move through these quickly. The current proposed budget for legislative conference training and dues is $28,750. And in just looking for potential savings and holding ourselves accountable, it seemed to me that if we adopted a practice of sending some but not all members to certain conferences and having representatives of the city go, that might be able to reduce some of our expenses in that area. I'm also aware that we're increasing the expenses for the council slightly due to the adoption of recommendations from the Council Compensation Committee. The next one is our understanding is that there are currently 7 police vacancies, depending on how the council decides about the city manager's proposal for the corporal position. There may be 6 police vacancies. In my questions, I haven't been able to get clarity on how our public safety has been affected by these vacancies. I'm not clear on how long they've been in place in this fiscal year, but in the absence of information that our public safety situation has suffered, or that that staff have been treated in unsustainable ways, just awaiting that information. That's why it says hiring freeze there. The next one, the legal services fee, that is a council responsibility, so this is not asking the manager to do anything, but it is striking that we have seen legal services go up. If this passed through, our budget for legal services would be up 40% since fiscal year '25. I know that there can be variations from year to year, but our audited FY '25 was 60% of this amount. And so I feel that it behooves us to really think about how could we adopt some practices or something, and not to assume we're going to have high legal expenses before we go in. That's why you have a rainy day fund. So if we pulled back on that, that would seem reasonable to me. The traffic study on Lincoln Avenue and the fringe benefit, those 2 items, those decreases and increases, are basically tied to moves that you'll see elsewhere. it is our feeling that a traffic study should be paid for from the red light and stop sign camera fund because it's related. It's a traffic safety issue rather than from the general fund. And then for the police pension contribution, that increase from the general fund, that increase contributions to the police pension would be tied to recognizing that the ERR is, if we believe that the equipment replacement reserve is more of a cushion than we need over a multi-year period, I think it's at 3.3 million right now, and we're putting 1.2 million in this year and staying steady, then our thinking is that we could actually, and this has been recommended by Arthur David Olson before, we could actually put that money to better use by putting it into the police pension fund. And the handout explains more the logic behind that.
Okay, Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I'll just go in order. The conference and dues, I think it's pretty fair to say that in the 4 years at least that I've been on council, it is very rare that everyone goes to any conference. I think that has almost never happened. I think I've seen it happen once, and it still wasn't everybody. So I think it's, I mean, I'll just state it as it is. I don't think that council is compensated properly for what we do. I think that there are a few things that make, and there are lots of things that make this job excessively burdensome and difficult already. I'm not happy with the way compensation is sitting. I can't recruit anybody to come into my role. I've just been working at it again, just so you know. There have got to be some other incentives that make this job worthwhile, and we've got, and if we get the kinds of people I would like to see up here, which is real people who live in our community that represent the real demographics of our city, then absolutely we must have funds set aside and adequate funds for everybody to go when a new council comes in, because these are the training that we get to become decent, accountable leaders. So I definitely don't support that particular line item. I also think staff need to be able to go to these events and be a part of that dialogue, and it shouldn't just be council. Police hiring freeze, I don't think that public safety is impacted. I do think it's a police morale issue. I don't support this line item. I lived through one attempted hiring freeze while on council. Can't tell you how terrible that was for staff morale. Don't want to see that again. I don't like even talking about it. And then the legal service fees, I'm going to invite any of my colleagues who have been around for even longer than me to speak to that. And the Lincoln study, I think that's an interesting proposition that it comes from the Stop Sign Camera Fund. I am a really big fan in general of the concept of good economics being that we attempt to spend funds that are as directly related to the revenue source as possible and then top it up with a rationale from the general fund. So I do think that's a very sensible idea. I think it would be even more marketable to like the local residents of Ward 5, if the stop sign camera that they're paying their tickets into, some of whom have already paid for like 4 tickets and are going, darn it, what is this for? You know, that they then go, oh, but there's going to be a traffic study on my street, you know. So I think it's a very reasonable idea. We're a small city. I like that concept. I have said similar things about like the tree fund, and I don't want to throw out crazy ideas, but just showing the parallel, like where if you're going to have a tree fund, then for example, you might use those tree fund costs to pay for the additional value of these kinds of special programs that we have in our city. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, very quickly, I have slightly different thinking, but the bottom line, I agree with much of what Councilmember Honzak says on the different proposals. I guess I would appreciate the staff commenting on whether the whether the legal services fees could be reduced a little, 151,000 down to fiscal 25 audited seems unlikely to me to be enough. But maybe there's something in there. And I'd like the opinion, because I agree, it seems to make sense to have the traffic study come out of the red light camera fund. But you didn't do it that way last year, and so I'd like to hear what your advice is on that. I don't understand the switch to ERR on the increased pension contribution, and I don't think that I like it because I was under the impression that we were trying to keep a constant, that the money that we were putting in this year was going to be the right amount to carry us through without adding another $500,000 into it. So, so that one doesn't, I'm much more concerned about that one. And as far as legislative conferences, et cetera, that is the training budget for the council members. And other than the MML Ocean City Conference, I don't see a lot of other bodies when I go somewhere. So I'm not sure that I understand why that would be really necessary. Thank you.
If I could
That's it
speak
for me.
to, oh, I'm sorry.
Would it be helpful to address the legal services now for council? Okay.
Yes, it
So,
would be.
in FY '25, the legal services budget consisted of just two items, the city attorney and the labor attorney. So the city attorney total budgeted cost was $320,000, and then the labor attorney's budgeted cost was $65,000. In FY '26, for the first time, we added investigations to the list of legal items covered under the budget. So in FY '26, the investigations line was $75,000. The city attorney's number dropped from 320 to 276. And then the labor attorney's line increased to $78K. Most of that adjustment was assuming that the labor attorney would be involved in negotiations in FY '26. And then in FY '27, there were two significant movements. So the city attorney fee is back to $300K. That fluctuation is pretty typical, at least from a budgeting standpoint. The labor attorney's cost was $70K. And then, and again, I think that was attempting to account for the potential of negotiations moving into FY '27. And then the two things that are, I think, the significant difference, investigations were increased from $75,000 to $100,000. And then the remaining amount was a $55,000 legal budget for legal services related to restrictive covenants. And so effectively, the 151 would remove the investigations and would remove the restrictive covenants. That total would be about 155, but relatively close.
Thank you very much. And I think just two points to remind my colleagues about. We have, what has already been communicated as a result of the Cooper case was that we would make sure that we're using third-party investigators. So elimination of that item from our FY '27 budget would mean that we in fact would not be budgeting for that. And then the restricted covenants, the reason why there was this ad for the legal services was in part because we're still trying to figure out legally how to change the deeds, but also the fact that there was a real possibility that we were going to have to deal with a lot more in terms of community notification and the costs associated with that. So I I just want to kind of put that nugget out there so that folks understand the broader implications of some of these modifications. And while I have the mic, I will go ahead and say, in terms of the conferences and the trainings, I personally don't go to all of them because I don't have time. But I will say, I do go to a number of the conferences. There's been instances where I've paid for conference attendance out of my pocket and travel out of my own pocket because it goes outside of what I believe is the allocated amount for our council. And what I do think is important is for people to understand that when we're going to these conferences, it is not a vacation. Believe you me, I would rather be on a nice sunny beach, laying down, resting myself, not jumping from event to event to try to get resources for the city, connect with different secretaries, trying to make sure that I'm rubbing elbows with the right people in the right places to bring things back. I am working every single conference I attend with the mindset of what can I bring back to this city. So I think that that is first and foremost something that is important for people to understand, that this is not just a waste of resources. It is a way for us to not only learn, but to also connect and bring ideas back. I know Councilmember DeBala, I don't want to speak for you, but there's been plenty of times you go to NLC, you're like, I heard about this technical assistance. I'm going to COG things, and I'm like, I know we can bring back this money here. Like these are working events. It is not a vacation. And so I will say that I would agree with Councilmember Honzak in elimination of these types of conferences and dues and making sure that we're able to continue to be members because we're able to leverage MML as an organization when it comes to lobbying the state for the various resources that we need. And if we're not a part of these organizations, we lose our ability to do that. The other piece, I am against the hiring freeze for the police vacancies. I think that we are, I do believe that morale is important. I think that we're accounting for natural vacancy rates in terms of what we talked about earlier in terms of the churn, execution rate, although I want to call it like a attrition rate, like staffing attrition. So I think that there's already a little bit of a proxy to control for the churn. I think just having a hiring freeze means that we're saying we want to reduce our police force, and I don't want to say that. The traffic study, I'm okay. I mean, I think the bigger thing is, and the only hesitancy I have around moving things that we want to make sure that we get done into these revenue buckets where we're not sure we're going to have the money for them, that is where there's a little bit of pause for me. I've learned my lesson about putting things that I think are really important into revenue funds that are uncertain. So now I've gotten burned, I've learned my lesson. I am very cognizant of the fact that you need to make sure if it's something that you absolutely cannot wait on, you want to make sure that the money is either already there or you are very sure it will be there. So that's my point with that. And then in terms of the swap, I'm calling it a swap. And I don't know if this is a question for Director Braithwaite, but I'm not understanding how you would swap $550,000 from the ERR, put it into the pension, and not expect for there to be another contribution on the back end. The math don't make it's not working for me. So you're either cutting back on what those the replacement schedule, you have to make some other sort of modification because you're reducing the overall pot of the ERR if you never make another contribution.
If I could speak to that, my impression, I mean, just my layperson impression was that, so the first off, the benefit of transferring the money from an accounting standpoint, from the ERR to the pension, is that it eliminates $25,000 a year from pension expense for 22 years because it's front-loading this money. And when I looked at the ERR, and I know we went back and forth on this maybe last week, but it does appear to be in a more than comfortable position to me to handle any kind of multi-year crunch, like the garbage truck purchases, this kind of thing, in replacement costs. The city is now meeting or exceeding annual recommended contributions of either 1.1 million or 1.2 million. The reserve was at 3.287 as of June 30th, 2025. Even with this transfer, it would be projected at 3.411 by June 30th, 2027. So by the end of FY27, it would have more than 100,000 more than it had at the end of 2025. The 5-year plan between FY27 and FY31 anticipates approximately 5 million in ERR drawdowns. That's about $1 million a year. So in simple terms, if we're putting $1 million in a year and we're committed to that, and we're pulling $1 million a year out, I don't think it needs to be sitting at 3.3 for us to be safe. And I feel like we should consider drawing it down, and it's kind of like paying down your mortgage in a sense. When you have money in a certain bank account, why not pay down your mortgage? There's an opportunity to pay down our long-term pension costs.
So, can
Go
we,
right ahead, 'cause-
can staff comment on a couple of things, please? First about the $75,000 transfer, the reason that the traffic study wasn't originally incorporated into the red light camera fund is because the expenses for that fund at the time the budget was developed were maxed. And so we didn't think it prudent to add any additional dollars to those accounts because, as the assigned reserve suggests, there are still some uncertainties about revenue over time. We haven't completed a full fiscal year of those new funds yet. And so, and then we're adding new cameras and then creating a separate subcategory that is the stop sign cameras that is even more new than red light. So we wanted to attempt to be extremely conservative on that front. And then regarding the $550,000 transfer, it is, Mr. Qualley, if you could scroll down to the unassigned reserve section, we do address that to some degree there. And what we show is that there is a, in order to, for illustration purposes, we show the original $1.2 million contribution to the ERR being negated. And then there are two subsequent transactions that reflect Councilmember Landman and Councilmember Slagle's proposed alternative. First, it shows the $650,000 contribution as an alternative contribution to the ERR. That is less than the $1.1 million recommendation. And then a alternative $550,000 committed to the police pension fund. Now, in terms of impact, what the lesser contribution does is it, I believe it's the end of FY27, Director Chung. It will reduce the it'll reduce the balance of the ERR from a currently projected 3.5 million to a newly projected 2.9 million. And so if our current projections take us to FY30, the new rendition of the 2.9 will take us to something less than FY30. We haven't had a chance to figure out exactly how long those dollars would last us. But there would be a negative impact to the balance, of course, by not contributing the full amount of the 1.1. Generally, staff has always advocated for a full contribution to the ERR because it is just fiscally prudent, and we don't want to jeopardize the financial circumstances of the city. The $1.1 million recommendation is what Raftellus recommended. It is generally what we see in when we do our own analysis of the ERR. And so we would like to and would advocate for council that we continue to put forth that amount. But of course, it is council's desire if we want to do something different.
So one question I have, because council members Schlegel and Landman are, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I kind of need somebody to walk me through this, that there is a thought that an advance or an increased contribution to the pension would save monies as well. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're proposing, Councilmember Schlegel, that making the swap, you would save money through the pension, and over time, the ERR would build, and you could put that money, are you proposing to put the money back? I'm trying to understand what you're talking about.
Per the actuary who presented on November 12th last year, the pension fund is operating on a 22-year horizon to eliminate the unfunded liability. So adding $25,000 a year for 22 years is something that covers $550,000 of that gap that we currently have.
Okay, so what I need from staff is can we break down the impact of it? We see the impact on the ERR. What would be the impact on our cost in terms of the contribution, the advance contribution to the police pension, right? Perhaps in terms of interest paid, I don't know. And then that would make it a little easier for me to say, no, we're losing money on both fronts, right? Or maybe this does make mathematical sense.
If I may, Madam Mayor.
Mayor,
Director Chung, Councilmember Lamb, if you can hold off, Director Chung is speaking.
Yeah.
I can contact the party, the contractor that actually do the pension evaluation, and find out the benefit of putting this $550,000 into the pension plan. What is the monetary benefit of putting more money now? Is it going to reduce the ultimate funding in the future? This is something that the actuary has to provide to us, because it's a different of math in relationship to pension plan. So we need to find out from them what is the actual benefit. Or we're front loading this $550,000 to our pension plan. So I need to contact the actuary to find out. Hopefully they'll give us an answer by 1 or 2 days. If not, it will be next week.
We don't have a meeting on Wednesday, so as long as I can have it all before Monday.
Okay, all right. I'll find out.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Landman, did you have a question?
I wanted to, before we leave this section, I wanted to address the legal portion that was the previous page that we were looking at.
Okay, go right ahead.
So I appreciate, by the way, Mr. Eubanks, with your more detailed presentation about what the different sub portions of that money were going to, and there was something built into the budget for fiscal 27 for investigations based upon, I assume, based upon the expenditure, the unusual expenditure that was made in this current fiscal year for the Cook matter. And I would just, I think with respect to that we should not be building in investigations money into our legal budget as a matter of course, because hopefully that was the outlier, and that's not something that we should anticipatorily prepare for in future years. unless you know something I don't know about fiscal year 27, that there's another investigation coming, I don't think we should budget for that. We can look to our unassigned reserve or to our assigned reserve and treat it as an emergency if it happens again, but it shouldn't be something that we anticipate will be an annual thing. So I'd like to consider that as an area where we could potentially reduce the planned expenditure. And then with respect to the $55,000 for the restrictive covenants matter, some of that is really not a legal expense. I mean, it is an expense that the law requires us to have to cover the costs of doing the notifications, but I don't really believe that that belongs in the legal budget. I mean, it could be that it's a contractor budget or it's an invoicing matter that should come out under the city clerk's office, because we're going to be invoiced by newspapers for putting notices in newspapers or whatever we got. If that might be modified, it might be much cheaper depending on whether we succeeded in getting the law amended at the very last moment in Annapolis, so that we can go with electronic notification only. But that, I don't think that $55,000 expenditure is very logical to be where we normally charge the costs of lawyers, and especially if we are outsourcing the work to Historic Tacoma, which was something that was contemplated at one time, at least, that we would contract with them. It wasn't strictly for legal services. It was for the, the guy in question happens to be a lawyer, but it's not a traditional legal service that they were going to be providing. So I those are both matters that should be reevaluated.
Yep. So I think we should take the investigations matter first. Is there someone that could speak to the increase in the legal fees in terms of the investigations?
Yeah, it's relatively straightforward. For the last several years, we have had a number of unexpected investigations, and this year, FY26, council and staff have decided and determined that a new process ought to be established for how the city manages certain types of concerns that have been presented to city manager. And there is a portion of those concerns that include and Mayor, you touched on this earlier, a portion of those concerns that are required by policy that they be investigated by a third party. And so because that is now an established requirement, established in a formalized policy, staff have included it in the formal budget.
Thank you. And Councilmember Landman, Deputy City Manager Hupty is here to talk a little bit about the restricted covenants and the legal fees. And I believe we might have received a memo on this as well. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Landman, so you are correct in that the covenant piece of the project, it has various components. One of the components is the legal notification. That itself is a separate part. Our estimates for that alone, we have received estimates that are up to $75,000. We were hoping that the change in the policy and the law at the state level would help relieve some of those costs because we would be allowed to publish the notification online. What we have learned is that we don't believe that has passed. We had spoken with Ann about it a while ago, but I haven't seen anything on it, so I don't believe that has there been any changes in the law. The other part of it, so there are three parts. It's the notification, there is the actual submission of the forms and recording, and then there's also a legal element. And what that entails is there's a form that you have to fill out. It has to go to the county attorney for approval. The county approval requires that the submitter, which in this case it would be us, even if a third party were to do it, we are the responsible entity. So any legal liabilities would fall on us. What that would mean is we would need the assurance of a legal review. We have discussed this with our city attorney. And we have been advised by our attorney that we should get legal review. And it's actually, I don't even know if I should say this, it's actually a lot more expensive than what is being budgeted here. We've looked at third-party legal review. It is steep. It is steep. I guess at some point the council would need to make a decision, but we can either we need to have the legal review, because otherwise the city assumes the risk if there are any errors, any omissions in the recordation of the amendment. So that's kind of in a nutshell of the reason behind our numbers.
Great, thank you very much. Councilmember Gilbert.
Thanks. And looking at the couple of the items, just had a couple of questions, and both are police related, and maybe Chief's here, maybe you can help me out a little bit. And in response to the legal fees, I know we talked about it before, but now that MPAA requires us to have a judge on those trial boards, where is that money coming from for that judge?
There you go.
I don't know. In this sense, we have a separate line item for those items. In this particular sense, is what Deputy City Manager Eubanks spoke about and the mayor spoke about earlier. It's related to certain types of complaints are now, per city policy, required to be assigned to an outside investigator to investigate. So those would be the cost associated with, say, hiring a law firm to investigate an allegation of sexual harassment or harassment. So that's the new city policy. That's what those costs are associated with.
Okay, but that's not coming from here, the legal services fees? That's
not related to the trial boards, no.
And the other comment and question I had was regarding the hiring freeze for the 4 police vacancies. I know the impact that that had on me when we were short, and I'm not certain where we're short right now as far as vacancies are concerned, but my concern is more than just police morale. And I know it's public safety, it's an officer safety matter, and it's a mental health matter for our officers as well. So I'm just curious where we're short and how those 4 positions will impact us as far as labor is concerned, as I mentioned earlier.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, and I want to be crystal clear. I think there was a statement meant earlier. We're not doing less. We're doing the same amount of work. We're just doing it with less people. So understand the impact on the existing people that are here. They are required to do overtime to offset for the officers we don't have. So there's that mental and physical impact where, you may have to work 4 hours over after you've already worked a 12-hour shift because we are short. So, and that also has a monetary impact. So there's a cause and effect on our officers' mental health. We still have the same amount of work, but we're doing it with less officers. We also have to offset for those officers we don't have with overtime. So there's cost impacts with that. We currently have the 7 vacancies we spoke of. We are actively hiring. As you know, our motto is quality, not quantity, but we have a bunch of quality people. It is very hard to hire police officers, but when we do, we want to keep them. If we were to freeze 4 police officers, it would put us behind maybe 8 to 10, maybe 12 police officers. Because remember, we have people that can retire. If we don't continuously actively hire, we're going to get behind the 8 ball. I don't want to get to the point, we have several quality people in backgrounds where they get through the background, they're quality people, they want to be here, and we can't offer them a position because we don't have the positions. The most important impact, and I cannot stress it enough, is the impact on our existing staff. Not only the morale hit because the positions are frozen, but now I have to continue to miss my family on holidays. I have to continue to see my family less. There's a mental and physical stress that's caused by having to do the exact same amount of work with 37 officers as opposed to 43 officers.
And I'm pretty certain we've been at that staffing level for more than a decade now, right? 43?
Yeah, well, we were at 42 officers, I think, in fiscal year 19 or somewhere thereabout. We got 1 additional police officer position. So to add, you know, we understand the impact that you know that costs have on taxpayers, and we looked at this. We felt comfortable because we normally hover when we're fully staffed around 42. So we think we can comfortably, you know, it's hard to hire that last one to get past that threshold. But if you start talking about 4 officers that we're freezing, it's going to have a
It was
significant
supposed to
impact.
be 3. I don't know how it came in as 4, but yeah.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
It still has the same impact.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, going back to well, first of all, while you're standing there, I'm not interested in freezing police positions. I just want to say that. Back to the pension piece. How is it that a pension fund contribution is an equipment and can be covered in the equipment reserve fund?
It wouldn't be. What the document's trying to communicate is that the 550 would be a contribution from unassigned reserve. So right now, the total 1.2 million is being contributed to the ERR.
Right.
We would break that up. 650 would be contributed to the ERR, and the 550, still coming from unassigned reserve, would go to the police pension fund.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. I'm thinking specifically about the legal services fee, but in general, as we're all thinking about this budget, I mean, I am hoping that we can kind of target in on the most realistic of numbers. So do we anticipate that we'll need an investigation for legal services next year? No, but it happens, and I'd rather us have the money there in case it happens instead of hoping it doesn't. And I think that's why I like that we've been doing things like the execution attrition rate, because it's just the reality that you never actually have every position filled. But I also like having, I think it's important for us to have our savings funds. If we can keep them full, because so I might look more deeply, but I don't really see a great need to try to reduce our ERR, because the reality is we will be buying new equipment. It might fluctuate a little or a lot, but I'm just more in favor of, if we have the savings there set aside for equipment, we will need to spend that. So I'd rather keep a cushion there, but kind of acknowledge the other places where we have money stored away that might not be used, like in some of the personnel costs. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Wesselek. So Councilmember Schlegel and Landman, I just want to confirm whether or not these items that are listed in red are reconciliation items or not. So for example, proposed change to an atrium, to the atrium design.
Yes, I can speak to that. It now appears that it's emerging, and Councilmember Landman can speak to this more, but there's emerging information that the county is going to be wishing us to house mental health clinicians in our building who will be serving the entire Down County area. And so in that case, we would be, if we proceed with the atrium design, as it was presented last year, we would be in effect building space for a county function. So that was that one.
So I just want to make sure, because I wasn't quite understanding when I read this in the line item. So we are not providing services, right? Like so we're not.
I just want to make sure everybody understands, our mental health counselors are
We're
not
not-
providing treatment here. So is there a concern that we would have a bunch of people from the county coming here for some sort of service? I think what we're talking more about is office space and occasional meeting space, but not necessarily like treatment facilities. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what the concern is regarding someone's office being here when they're 50% of the time working on Tacoma Park issues and 25% of the time working on Montgomery County proper issues.
I don't know
I'll
those
try to do
percentages,
that.
so I'll defer to Councilmember Landman, yeah.
Okay, so I think that there are ongoing discussions that going on right now with the county about the status of the mental health clinician program, which have been proposed to be changed somewhat from how they were understood at the time that the pilot was first designed. We haven't had a chance to discuss those in the city council as of yet, but it would appear that it's possible that the current pilot is going to take something of a left turn or a right turn. Not to say that one of the left or right is bad, but that it would potentially be that what we have in Tacoma Park would be mental health clinicians who are serving the entire down county area as opposed to being part of a Tacoma Park pilot, and it would be basically a county program that was based in our city building. Maybe that's perfectly good thing, but we need to know more about it. But in the meantime, what is the appropriate funding mechanism if we're constructing office space for the county program to be housed in Tacoma Park as opposed to our mental health clinicians serving Tacoma Park alone? And so I don't think Councilmember Schlegel and I are not able to assign a dollar figure to this, and that's why probably we asked that it be brought to the council. It says not quantifiable. I mean, it says the project isn't permitting. The current design of the project isn't permitting, but is the current design still one that is appropriate based on whatever the changes might be that are coming to the program? And also, should it be paid for entirely through our own budgetary means if it's going to be a countywide or an all down county program? And so we want to bring that to the council's attention. I'm not exactly sure how you put a dollar figure on it right now, and I understand fully why it would be in red here, but that is reason for having
Okay,
it
I
here.
think it's important for us to decouple, because I think that what's happening is you all are coupling staffing, the mental health staff, the mental health counselors, and perhaps, I don't know where you're getting this intel from, but conversations that may be happening at the county level regarding the budget and regarding the FTE for the counselors, which the county has said.
No, the office space that we would be building. It's not to do with it's only to do with the construction of office space to house the personnel. Nothing to do with the.
So no. Let me finish. What I am saying is, what the county has no say so in how we deal with our space. What the county has said, and staff definitely correct me if I'm wrong, is that they will try to work to keep our mental health counselors paid for within the county, which it's currently, we get county related folks anyway. Our staff or our mental health counselors are coming in through the county. But what we have been told is that if they're able to work out where the county starts, once our pilot officially ends and the county starts to pay for and cover our mental health counselors through their counselors, then that staff could not be just limited to us. That means that staff would have the ability to be farmed out to other places within the county. So we will have them, but they may be out in other places. What I'm trying to make sure I understand is how we're taking that potential staffing change and turning it into a need to change the atrium. So the atrium design. So I just can staff kind of walk us through? Can we first have staff walk us through what you've heard from the county in terms of what they are proposing in terms of the mental health counselors and how we may do the share of staff. Can we just get that spelled out?
I'll be happy to start. What we've learned preliminarily from the county recently is an apparent willingness to base 2 county-paid clinicians, as our current clinicians are based in the county and county-paid, but to base them here, still 2, just like, we've had 1 full-time and 2 part-time lately, but in essence, 2 offices, to do the referrals that Madam Mayor referred to, not to have a different mission from the standpoint that, our current clinicians, we're not providing in-house services in our community center, but we're deployed in appropriate situations, sometimes by themselves and sometimes in conjunction with police officers as the situation warranted. We're still talking about a scenario, apparently, whereby the county would continue to pay for that expense. In essence, they would just deploy 2 of their professionals to work here as they have been deploying clinicians the past year in Tacoma. And we do have a meeting, the chief and Esmar and I, with the county executive's office next week to try to get some more certainty, bring some more information back to the council. There's no formal agreement at this point, but we would like to get some solid options to be able to bring back to the mayor and council. Chief, did you have anything to add?
I would just add on the side, there's also a state grant associated with this and having the mental health counselors here. So there's a benefit of having that as well.
So just so that I'm clear, there has been no official agreement just yet in terms of how the structure would work in terms of those counselors potentially needing to take their cars and go to Silver Spring to help someone.
So the discussion we're going to have is obviously about the funding. The goal is to have the county fund them after next fiscal year. What we're hoping will happen is one of 2 things. The county will continue our pilot with just the calls they respond to in Tacoma Park, or they may expand the pilot to this team that's assigned here and gather the information both in Tacoma Park and Silver Spring. But yes, they still will respond to calls both in Tacoma Park and Silver Spring. The value we have in having them here, obviously they can work directly with HCD if there are issues. We can, if we have an issue, we need to consult with them. They also can provide training to our officers. So there's a definite benefit of having them here within the community center. So we're hopeful that we can, once we talk to the county executive's office, we get a clearer idea of the commitment for funding, which we're pretty confident in, but also the structure that will exist after July 1st.
And I just want to confirm in terms of the atrium design to accommodate the mental health counselors, was it not related to the office space that they may need, as well as making some drastic improvements for dispatch?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And could I?
Councilmember Schlegel.
So in answer to questions about this, the diagram provided of the current design, it still shows there's mental health team office. Then there's an adjacent space called private conference room, mental health consultation. And then the largest space to be constructed is mental health crisis response and police dispatch. So the latter 2 spaces, to a 100% extent or a partial extent, I'm concerned that they could end up being locations that we had constructed where residents from outside Tacoma Park were receiving private mental health consultation and that sort of thing.
That's not the purpose of the pilot. It's explained multiple times. This is a response pilot. A response model. This is not an inpatient model where people walk in and they see a clinician. There are other opportunities or other venues throughout the county for those type of services. That is not what this is. This pilot is based on us responding to 911 calls. It is not about people coming in. And Director Braithwaite is here. She can speak to what the original Atrium project was.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly remind us kind of where we were when this started in 2018 when we started working on the design. The original driving need was the conditions of dispatch, and I think for those of you that were on the dais several years ago, you heard from many members of the community as well as dispatchers themselves about the difficulty of the working conditions. And if you haven't visited dispatch, you should peek in there because it's a tiny little closet that 2 or 3 people are required to work in, and it's insufficient in size. The additional need, they were having to address that need for more space for dispatch and working and living in our building. Really soon after it was built, there was an apparent unhappiness with the 3-level atrium in our building and the noise situation that results in. So you hear noise from the first floor to the 3rd floor at a fairly accelerated rate because of acoustics. So in addition to the need to expand dispatch, there was a need to address that space use issue. We also have a situation where people walk into the police lobby and it's huge and cavernous and they don't know where to go and they have to go all the way to the back to get to dispatch. So the design, as you'll see, is a way to chop up the lobby into a much more usable space where you come in the building, you see exactly where the police lobby is, you enter there and can get much more easy access both visually and auditorily to the dispatch staff themselves, which will have a much enlarged space. And it'll create that floor between the 1st and 2nd levels, so the 2nd level will now become a usable space on the 2nd floor of the building. So there's multi-functions that are being addressed by the Police Atrium Project, but the initial driving force was the need to expand dispatch and then to create a more workable building. There are the 2 clinicians' offices. There's also a conference room that can be used for police or other uses. That term of community health and dispatch, it really is the dispatch space. It's not going to be used for any kind of clinicians. It will clearly be the 911, the call center, and dispatch.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. And it's getting late, so I see this as trying to alter a capital expense that we approved a year ago based on something that was not a factor in why we decided to fund the Atrium project. I mean, it was a part of it, but I mean, I feel like, are we hoping to ask the county to pay towards us building this building because they might use some of that space at some point in the future? Like, it just doesn't, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I understand that there's uncertainty or the mental health thing is shifting, but we are always going to need dispatch. We are always going to have staff down there. We want the building to be better. And we all voted on that already. So I'm just going to say that.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. So just want to keep plugging through the recording change to vehicle sales. Is that a reconciliation item?
This is no, this is a request that going forward that the budget provide clear records of what happens with individual vehicles that are surplused and sold. And the next one is that going forward the budget clarify with tax duplication when for example the amount for the police, not crossing guards but police, is level over the last few years, and so relative to inflation it's dropping, and I think that's good for us all to be able to track.
It's level per the law.
Yes, I understand.
So
okay,
I would say read the law and understand why we're getting paid the amount that we're getting paid, which quite frankly benefits the city tremendously.
I believe you're misunderstanding. My suggestion is simply that people are interested to know how, because the agreement does not have a cost of an inflationary adjustment, how that amount that we're receiving begins to be a lesser percentage reimbursement over time. I'm not saying I misunderstand the agreement. I understand that it's a set amount, but I think from a budget tracking standpoint, it would be helpful to be able to see that information in the budget.
Okay.
And if you don't
Can,
think so,
can,
then
can, can somebody explain the arrangement that we have with the county regarding the amount of money that we receive for our police and for tax due?
I don't need that explanation.
I think it'll be helpful for our residents to hear
Okay.
why we get a flat amount.
All right, so per, a few years back, maybe 5 or 6 years back, we negotiated with the county. Our rate had remained the same. It was about $2.4 million, and it remained the same for about 10 years. We went through this process. As everyone knows, the county did an estimate of what it would cost them to do policing. Bare bones policing, no community policing, none of that. Didn't include overtime, didn't include a lot of ancillary costs. They gave a certain FTE count. That is what their cost would be. That was way below the 4 million and some change. So what we negotiated was that 4 million and some change would be locked in until such time that their estimates, so their estimates per FTEs that they estimated exceeded that 4 million. So every year they do that cost analysis, and they may add FTEs, they may delete FTEs. Most likely it's an increase in FTEs. If any time that cost for their estimates exceeds that $4 million, we will get the increase.
So it's important for folks to understand that tax dupe estimates are not based on our cost. The county doesn't care. The county cares about how much do they spend on certain types of services, and they're only reimbursing us based on how much they might spend on those things. And so our police amount, and the reason it is flat and the reason it is the way that it is because of how much it costs the county to provide police services to us, and whether or not the amount that they provide is, we're able to get above that because we're at the 4, unless they spend more than the amount that we've negotiated in the law. All right. And I think the last item is the non-union staff salary limitation.
And Councilmember Lamb, would you like to take that one?
I'll try. So we had a discussion last year about the fact that that as salaries of senior management had been tracking along the same percentage increases as members of our staff who are at the lower end of the pay scale, that the differential between top level pay and bottom level pay becomes more problematic and greater, and that it was appropriate to consider a mechanism that enables us to continue to increase salaries at the places in our pay scale where people have the greatest case to be made for those increases, but that to have those percentage increases, 5% of $100,000 is a lot more than 5% of $40,000, and that therefore we wanted to have a mechanism built into the budget that we could plan for, where we are ensuring that a reasonable increase is made at the top end of the pay scale as well, because those people also experience inflation, as do we, but that it not always be based upon a percentage of total pay because of the inequitable way that affects the pay differential, and because it is a way to, as we call on ourselves to limit the cost to the city by keeping our own pay at the lower end of the pay scale, limited to an inflation adjustment, that it is reasonable to do the same for the most highly paid members of our staff. So that's why we are proposing a mechanism here to have to build an inflation factor, but have it be more constrained at the top end of a pay scale, both for equity reasons and for budgetary reasons.
Councilmember DeBala.
First, I don't see this as a budget item in the sense that I don't see how we go back into the budget and back out a certain number of salaries of a certain level to reduce a certain percentage. I mean, it's just a non-starter for me as a budget item. I'm also surprised that you would want to discuss this at this time in public, given that we are in the middle of union negotiations with two unions.
It's not about it's about
It is not about the
non-union.
unions, but it starts with the unions. And so I'm really not prepared to talk about this at this point. I think it's a really ill-advised.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Okay, not seeing any additional, not seeing any additional lights. Let's just see if there are any other. I think we've gotten through the expenditures. We talked about some of these already.
Did we talk about the odometers, or was I just, no?
We did not talk about the odometers.
Did we talk about the last one about this,
Let's see.
We don't have to do it all together.
Yeah, we don't. We can deal with the, yep. All right, so we will pick up with the other items next Monday. If there's additional reconciliation items, please make sure that you send them forward so that we can add them to the list. If we could just make sure that we flag those items that we've already discussed, so we don't have to talk about them again. And then that way we will keep the conversation going regarding the remaining reconciliation items.
Before we wrap up, Mayor, Councilmember Landman and Schlegel, you had an item that would be in red light and stop sign camera. It was a proposal related to a decrease of $275,000. And I believe it was related to police CIP items. Director Chung and I could not figure out where you got the 275 total from. So if you could break that down for us.
We'll be
and
happy
share
to
it
do
with
that.
us, please. It'd be very helpful.
These were all, two of them, the blood analysis and the armory have been proposed by staff to be removed in reconciliation tonight.
Okay.
The other items that summed to 275,000 they appeared in the CIP this year after not having been in any out years prior.
Mm-hmm.
So the question was needing more justification for why those items are suddenly needed at this point in time, other than that there might be money in the red light and stop sign camera available.
Okay.
You know,
Even
and,
if they're
yeah.
duplicates, if you could just send the full list that equates
Sure.
to 275.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
All right, well, Councilmember Honzak.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I know it's late. I have a question. If, I am concerned a little bit, there are a lot of items in front of us without values attached to them yet, and I'm a little bit concerned about staff capacity and time. Is it reasonable for us to, is it too quick for us to possibly remove any of these items that don't have dollar values attached to them to reduce staff workload over the coming days? I know it's late. But if there are some clear items, or are any of my colleagues, those who introduced items tonight, willing to remove any of your items already based on the dialogue, that such that the staff would not be compelled to follow up with numbers?
We can confer and speak to the staff about it. And I think that's a sensible question, and I'd like an opportunity to talk to Councilmember Schlegel about it. And meantime, I'm still looking to be interested to see what other council members have to put on the table.
Yes, I concur that I think it's a great suggestion, and I'll talk it over with Councilmember Lamon since we co-introduced these. There may be a couple of items where I still feel like that the gist of it didn't come across, and so for that reason, I would hope for another opportunity, at least to talk one-on-one with people, and for that reason, to keep it on the books to be calculated.
I hear you. I think there's a lot of value too in if you heard some of the public comments that folks made tonight, and you thought you heard a trajectory of travel, if you heard that there were at least 4 members or maybe 3 members that were feeling any particular way about an item, that you might approach those who seem like they haven't expressed an opinion, just to see if there's anything we can remove from the staff workload in the coming days, because there are so many items that don't have a dollar figure. And I just, in fair disclosure, I have about 3 items right now that are outstanding that the staff are also pursuing, which is why they haven't been put before council, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember DeBala, that's the old light. All right. Seeing
Councilmember
no more-
Slagle and Lyman, one other place where we could use some clarification is a sign reserve. One of your proposals was a global $1 million reduction. If you could specify where you want that $1 million to be deducted from per each of the assigned reserve categories, please.
I couldn't find the individual categories accounted for anywhere. That's why I know there's 4 categories named, but I didn't see in the budget book where each one had a value for it this year.
I believe the easiest place to look it should be in one of the responses. I believe it's part 1. But if you don't have that information, we could certainly share it.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Are we really not going to have any more lights? All right. Some of us got to go to work in the morning. All right. Thank you all so much. We will reconvene budget reconciliation on Monday. Have a good night.